I'd like to call to order the December 7th, 2015 Board Finance Committee meeting. I'm Candace Chow. We have more, actually, folks in our audience than we typically do, so I'm very glad you're here, as well as you all back there, too. Oh, there she is. I was going to make a change to our agenda because we did not have yet all of the members of the committee in place, but I don't think we have to do that now. Welcome, Ms. Kwiatrowski. So just by way of process before we get into the agenda items, because we do have a couple topics tonight that folks are definitely here and want to offer input on. We typically make the Finance Committee meeting a little bit more casual than the regular board meeting, so that's why there wasn't a sign-up sheet per se. But what I'd like to do is, as we talk through the comments, and specifically, as we're talking about transportation options as example, is we'll have some discussion, we'll have a presentation that will hopefully help to clarify questions around, and then have questions from the public that you all should come forward at that point, 2 by 2 or however many we can fit at the table. We'll move some of our other guests out of the way. And we'll try to keep it at 3 minutes. We aren't, as strict here because we do want to hear your comments, but given the number of folks, so we can go through that. And we do that typically after the discussion for 2 reasons. One is so that everybody here has the same level of information, and that may shift what you want to comment on or how you want to comment on. 2, because this isn't a board meeting where we are taking the final action. Your input can still then be input into if it moves forward to the board, which is the process. If we were to take action here as a finance committee and say, yes, we want to move these recommendations to the board will then take that up. And so the input that you provide can still be considered as part of that discernment and discussion before the board makes their final approval. So I think the ordering works well that way. Okay, so we have a couple.
There is a board meeting next week.
Yes, there's a board meeting next Monday and the 16th. And we'll decide, I think, ultimately, I'm sorry, 14th. Oh, the 16th is the Jingle Bell Bash, so if you're going, no. We'll decide based on the discussion tonight, if we're going to move the recommendation forwards and if that would come as an action for the board or as a discussion for the board. So at minimum, each of these items is seen twice and reviewed twice. So I think with that, we have a couple action items we're going to start off with that should not be terribly long. Again, we want to be respectful of everybody's time here. So we kind of moved the action items that were a little more straightforward, we hope, to the beginning of the discussion. So first is our minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 2nd Board Finance Committee meeting?
I so move.
Thank you. Take roll call.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
The Board Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the, well, I didn't say that part. I was supposed to say that before you took the roll call. Okay. The Board Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the November 2nd Board Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented. So then we already said yes. Okay. The first action item is item 3 on your agenda, or item is a budget calendar for fiscal year 17. And I think Mary's going to present that.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. The budget calendar is presented to you as it has been in the past. We bring that to the Board Finance Committee in December and also to the board in December for a vote, because we do not have a Finance Committee meeting in January when it needs to be approved by. So we are asking for approval in December, and there are no substantial changes to this calendar. It's very in line with calendars you've seen in the past, and it is a legal requirement that we adopt the calendar. I'll take any questions.
Yeah, I have a quick one. You said December, but the calendar itself says January 25th, 2016, as adoption of the calendar by the board? Or maybe I'm not understanding this correctly.
That actually should have December 14th, 2015. So thank you for pointing that out, because that is the date we are asking for board approval. We will change that for the December 14th packet.
Okay. And then I just had a couple of other, two questions, really. One is, in developing this particular calendar, have you overlain what stage we'll be at in negotiations with the teachers' union? Because there are things that I would presume in the negotiations would impact the budget.
Final approved contracts will affect.
And if those subjects haven't come up in the calendar itself, then it seems like we're doing double work in a way?
Well, what we've done in the past when we have not had negotiated agreements in place before the budget is voted upon is we use assumptions in our projections, and we would have assumptions then in the 16-17 budget if we don't have final agreements. And that was exactly what we did at the last negotiations.
Do you think it might improve the process if we did have some preliminary discussions or way of?
I think having known data is always better than estimating and assuming.
So if
but-
there's a way at all of doing that,
So we can, it's an interesting suggestion, and we'll consider it as we bring this forward next week. I think the other thing is that the actual adoption of the 17 budget doesn't happen until sometime in September XX of 16.
Right.
So that gives us an outside parameter, and I guess the question is, at that point, we would hopefully be done with all of our negotiations and be moving forward. And if not,
Then we continue on with an assumption.
with the assumption.
An
of
assumption
budget.
of an increase, right, as we have in the projections now, an assumed increase.
But so noted, why don't we consider whether, I mean, we can either include in here some sort of double check on where we're at in negotiations based on the assumptions, and then if there are changes along the way, or we've settled, that would obviously impact what we have as
Yeah.
well.
and, thank you. And then the second question I have is, we have in here that there's I have to close this, review of staffing allocations, that occurs in April. And don't we have to notify people that we are not retaining, or people that are being riffed before April?
And we have those discussions as an administration prior to that time. This might be the date upon which notice is provided, or it is known in the budget development process, but those discussions take place long prior to April.
Okay. So at this point, it isn't really a review, or is it just,
We are always reviewing staffing allocations right up until even when we're in a budget year. But we want to have as accurate information as we can before we're bringing a tentative and then an ultimate final budget to the board.
But to be sensitive to any potential reductions in force,
right?
I think March 31st is the date that
That's
we
what I
would
thought
have
it
to
was.
notify, and
Yeah.
that we're obligated to do per agreements.
So maybe we should be adding, could we
The
add?
review of staffing allocation should maybe
Prior
be
to
moved up
that,
into March,
If
perhaps.
it's multiple times, leave it in April, but move, at minimum, put one earlier, is
Right.
what I'm hearing you say,
That's what I'm saying,
Yep.
yeah.
for the purposes of, that we have to abide by our contractual arrangements.
I mean, if we know that we're going to do something, we know that we are engaging in some RIFs, it just seems to me that, that has to be done by March 31st, that the review of staffing allocations perhaps should occur sooner.
Yeah. Other questions? Jennifer?
So I had another sequencing question about when we talk about capital and use of debt service extension base and the sequencing before the vote and the final approval of the budget, which this year happened after we approved the budget. And I just wanted to understand why that is. Are there certain, compliance reasons why it can't fit in, why the debt service extension-based conversation can't happen before we approve the final budget?
Well, the timeline for issuing bonds and identifying capital projects and getting the most current updated estimates, if it's a project we're bidding, such as we'll be talking about the roof bids shortly, we like to bid those late in the year, like winter is a good time for a bid. So we'll have final numbers before we have a bond sale recommendation coming to the board, and we don't want to have a bond sale recommendation coming before we need the actual funds. So it's really the timing of projects that are going on during the summer. 15, for example, have been funded with the bond sale approved earlier in the spring. And because the bond sale is approved mid-year, we don't assume that it will be approved, and therefore we don't add additional potential expenses in a budget. So the capital projects that are approved are then funded with the next bond sale, and the expenses planned for the following year would be included in that following year's budget. So in other words, this year's budget for technology expenses, for example, so we're in 15-16. We funded these budgeted expenses with the bond sale in the spring of 15, and the funds were received and then moved on July 1st into that fund. So it is kind of a timing issue with when we would bring a bond sale recommendation, which we're anticipating again for February.
Okay, great, that's very helpful, thank you.
I have other questions about I have just one other question about the budget calendar, and that is, with respect to our movement to priority-based budgeting for this coming year, for fiscal 17, I guess my question is whether that will necessitate any changes to either timeline or tasks or approach on the budget calendar, because this does look very similar to previous, and this is going to be a different approach. So, whether it's specifically, digging deeper into getting input from, building level supports and when that might happen, et cetera. So it was just a question around that and how it fits to the strategic planning commitment.
We used a zero-based budgeting process for developing the current year's budget, and it did not affect change to the proposed budget calendar. The budget is really a process that never ends as far as the business office is concerned. We are constantly monitoring the current year budget while we're working to develop the following year's budget as well as the financial projections. This is a legal requirement that we post these dates for the budget calendar. The behind-the-scenes process is going to look a little different as it did this prior year with zero-based budgeting. We will be incorporating a slightly different format for priority-based budgeting, but very similar to the zero-based budgeting process we used this year. So again, those are behind-the-scenes budget development that will not impact these reported on dates.
Thank you. If there are no other questions at the table, then I'll ask, is there anybody in the audiences want to speak to this topic? Okay. Great. Then we should take the action. The Board Finance Committee recommends that the budget calendar for fiscal year 17 be presented to the full board on December 14th, 2015. Do I have a second?
As is or with modification?
With the modification of December 14th, correct?
So, well, it would be with two modifications. I think
Or
is what
perhaps, I would suggest that we say with modifications as necessary.
with modifications as
Yeah.
necessary. Okay. So let me restate that. The Board Finance Committee recommends that the minutes, oh no, that's not it. The Board Finance Committee recommends that the budget calendar for fiscal year 17 be presented to the full board on December 14th, 2015, with modifications as necessary.
Yes. I second that.
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So our next topic is the King Arts Roofing and Masonry bid. And we have a trusted colleague here.
We do. We have both Mr. Don Stevenson, our Director of Building and Grounds, and then we have Tom Hutchinson, who is our roofing and masonry architect from the Hutchinson Design Group, joining us this evening. The district has a lot of outstanding capital projects, many of which were identified in the summary capital project report, which is included in the packet. But the number one area of concern for the Building and Grounds Department remains roofing and masonry. We had originally a 10-year timeline for completing the roofing and masonry survey that Mr. Hutchinson completed for the district a few years ago. And we have, due to limited debt service, limited available funds, we have had to delay those projects. So this King Arts bid is only covering a portion of that building. We were hoping to be able to get half of the roof done. It's not going to happen. We only have an allocation of $840,000, and that includes professional fees at a little over $100,000. So the way, we did get estimates for completing the entire roof, which is why you see pricing here with a 3% increase if we were to approve work for 2017. And we did that for planning and budgetary reasons. So the way our funding structure looks now and the way our 8-year rough tentative capital plan looks like now, we may be needing to do roof work at King Arts over 3 separate summers. Summer 16, which is what's before you, summer 17, which would be wave 2, and then summer 18, we would be able to complete that final roof within available debt service funding. I just spoke to Mr. Hutchinson, and we are hopeful that in that 3rd summer, we might be able to open the building for summer school use if we can allocate that work to areas that may not be as curricular necessary, such as the PE or the gym area. We might be able to do roofing in unoccupied spaces. So just to reiterate, though, the roofing and masonry work is a top priority. It certainly will provide the district with better insulation. We can hope to have reduced energy costs and obviously provide protection to the building contents. So what is before you is a recommendation for the base bid 1 with alternates 2 and 3 for a total of $732,500 to the low bidder, A1 Roofing. And I'm happy to entertain any questions.
I just have one.
Yes, Omar.
So have we ever done business with All American Exterior Solutions?
Tom, have we?
I don't believe the district has, but I have on numerous projects.
Has the district done business with A1 Roofing before? It's just, if you look at the 2 bids, and I don't know if anyone knows anything about purchasing, it's odd to have $700,000 bids come up and they're $2,000 apart. So I was just curious if there's been prior experience with either one of the roofing firms.
Not at this district. The contractors who have worked in the district are Sullivan Roofing and Knickerbocker in the last 5-6 years.
Other questions about the bids before us or the potential extension of timeframes, just to make sure everybody's clear on that? Is everybody clear and comfortable at the table, understanding what's being proposed?
It expands the non-use of King during the summer for an extra year,
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yes.
Right, yes.
just to be clear. Yeah.
But these bids, this covers the 2016 portion.
Yes,
The dollar amounts.
the dollar amounts on the recommendation form cover the summer 2016 work. You do see additional bid pricing, such as bid package 2, and then alternates 4 and 5 that we're not able to fund at this time. And that would be pricing to complete the King Arts roof.
And would those bids, as stated here, be honored if next year we are going to that? So that's the other question.
Yes, they would be honored. There is a 3% escalator clause. You can see the percent of the escalator clause in the far right-hand column. I'm looking at A1 and All-American with the 3% escalator clause. So yes, they would honor these bids with an escalator clause for next year, and that's another advantage of bidding it now. So we know, and actually, if we need to reduce the scope, because we only had $600,000 allocated for summer 17. So we would not be able to do all of bid package 2, for example. We're going to have to split this work, further split the work,
Okay.
which then may require that we rebid it if we are looking at a reduced scope.
Are we obliged to go with A1? We aren't obliged to go with A1 Roofing for bid for the second piece of it, or because we're only approving?
We
were to approve today for bid package 1 and the alternates?
We are not obligating ourselves to approving any bid work with any of these vendors. we could rebid the project, and if we are drastically changing the scope, which it looks like we're going to have to do in order to fund it within available debt service, we are going to have to rebid this.
Okay, for the balance of it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions?
When you
Suni?
say that we'd have to rebid it with a different scope, what?
Sure.
What does that mean?
If we have bid pricing here from the various contractors, if we were to do a reduced scope, because I don't think we can fund bid package 2, I only have $600,000 allocated for summer 17, and that includes professional fees. So at this point, I don't have $1.2 million to spend on roof work.
Right, but so what would be?
So if we would have to reduce the scope to let's say half or even 40% of this scope, that's a large change in scope. And because it's such a large change, we would need to rebid this because another contractor may be able to provide a lower bid price. A1 may not be low, in other words, if we're looking at doing a reduced scope.
I guess what I'm asking though is what would we not be doing? What would we rebid to say, well, don't include this now?
We would probably look at bid package 2, and Tom, jump in if I have it wrong.
What they would be, let's say there's 16 roof areas in bid package 2. You'd only be doing 6 roof areas. It's just a reduction in the amount of work.
Amount of the roof.
Type of work would all remain the same. You're just
Okay.
reducing the area.
And extending it, that's why it would extend into the following
Into
year.
If we had the resources to do bid package 2, that would complete the job?
Yes, that plus professional fees.
So extending it
So
into
that's-
18.
So that's why.
Correct.
And
That's the
with a
point.
3% escalator, yes.
So we'd still do those other areas, it would just have to be one more year.
Yes,
Which.
yes,
I'm
and
obviously
because-
Assuming that it can hold for another.
Yes, yes, and we've had Tom do small repair and replacements here and there, and every year he reassesses our roofs because we have delayed roof and masonry work, and it is our number one concern. You know, we don't want to have air quality issues or other problems with building contents and such in having any concerns with the roof or the masonry. But because I know right now I don't have 1.2 million, this scope will be smaller. And because it's going to be smaller, that's going to require us to rebid this, because the contractor may have a totally different pricing structure for a smaller
Right.
scope. But we did bid it, so we at least had some idea what we were looking at.
Okay.
And if we could fund it, we haven't yet rejected it. So if $1.2 million appears, and we can add in alternates 4 and 5 and pay professional fees, we'll have a recommendation coming for summer 17,
Okay.
a year from now.
Tom or Don, anything else that you would like to add?
The only thing is, these are contractors, we've all worked with all of them, and they're all the top in the area. They're top notch, we vetted them all. We have specific requirements, and they are all very large, well-organized, well-funded contractors. So you did get the best of the best. And it was very competitive between 3 contractors to be so close, depending on what alternate you take. Heartbreaking for one contractor, depending on what, alternate you took, but I'm pleased that they're close because it shows that at least we seem to have all the scope covered quite well.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak to this topic? No? Okay. All right, then I will find my sheet here.
I'm sorry, may I just add one more clarifying statement? This is an important one. So we don't yet have the cash on hand to fund this work. The approval of these bids is contingent upon future board approval of the bond sale to fund this work. And as I mentioned previously, we expect to be bringing a bond sale to the Board Finance Committee in February. And that's why it's written into the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to read the language for the motion. The Board Finance Committee recommends that the King Arts roofing masonry bid approval be presented to the full board on December 14, 2015, as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Claudia? Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Yes.
So moved. So now we're going to move into our discussion and potential action on transportation options for fiscal year 17. And we have reserved a larger portion of our agenda time for this topic. I think Dr. Warren is going to tee us up or tee off the conversation. Oh, thank you both very much. And we'll talk about the context of the recommendations, et cetera, and then we can go into questions of the board and the finance committee here, and then we'll move to public comments and questions after that.
So thank you very much, and let me also, as Candace did, extend a welcome to both audiences, left and right here. We'll look forward to your comments and concerns and questions as we move forward. What I'm going to do is spend a little bit of time before I turn it back over to Dr. Brown to frame give us some framing comments on transportation options and then what we're specifically asking for tonight. And let me do this by providing a little bit of context about transportation writ large and what we're working on, as well as the very specific points that are in the package. Let me start with the quality of our transportation services. I think from the feedback that we've received from community members, from the families that we serve, it ranges from poor to slightly better than poor. And so I just want to be honest, and I think and we've been working on improvements, over time, but we've got long bus routes throughout the cities that we serve. We have late buses, and we've been challenged both working with our provider to improve service, improve service quality. And we've been working over last year and into the summer and over the beginning of this year to think about how to improve the bus routing, how to provide efficiencies, how to pay attention to eligible riders, and how to, in some ways, make less stops along the way so that we can have more efficient rides. And so that's been part of our concern and about quality and about the quality of transportation services. We actually thought about changing last year, and we had several forums with community members around the quality of services and around potential changes last spring, and we thought we actually moved forward to say to the community that we are going to change. And then but I pulled back on that. And I pulled back on that because I wanted to see more analysis into the routes that we have and more ways to think about how we could minimize the impact, not to say that anything that we're proposing doesn't have an impact on families and community, but how we can minimize the impact as we move forward while still paying attention to the concerns that we have about quality services and how we could actually create viable options that make some sense. And we have budget concerns writ large in the state of Illinois and in District 65 around the broader issues of budget uncertainty, the lack of a state budget, and our own issues, which we'll be discussing later on this evening too, on how we're moving forward. And so if you combine all of those, that a deep concern about quality, a deep concern about wanting to create viable options, and concerns about budget and keeping the budgetary decisions as far away from the classroom as possible, we move forward on some options that we're presenting tonight. Again, part of what drives this is board policy on walking distances, IDOT safety hazards, and Mary will talk about this more, and any sort of ways that we could be more efficient without being having such an impact on families that we serve. So tonight, we're going to ask the board finance committee to consider 3 things. And indeed, this is a discussion, as Candace suggested, that starts here, and then we'll go formally to the board as a whole, although most of the board members are here tonight, I believe next week, or following weeks, depending on your deliberations as a board and as we listen to our community partners. Tonight, we're, asking the Finance Committee to approve what we're calling new walk zones. And they're really not, they're new hazard, they're the juxtaposition of where are there hazards, how do we address the hazards, and resulting in new walk zones that are within the 1.5 mile parameter of walking. and that's a stated policy. And what, by doing that, by asking for that, we're recommending that we would eliminate 3 bus routes. 2, we're asking for approval of extending the bus pickup stops by 1 block for younger children and 2 blocks for older children. And again, that's in the spirit of looking for viable options to increase the efficiencies of our bus routes. And indeed, Jordan Ryan's here and can attest. I mean, we have some bus routes that are rather long, that are beyond rather long, to be honest. And so how do we actually start to condense those routes so that we can move forward in a way that doesn't leave a child and a family waiting for a bus or on a bus for more than an hour. So we're asking for approval of the new bus route pickup zones of an extra block for younger children and 2 blocks for older children. And 3, we're providing an overview and information that pertains to our before and after school providers. This is not a decision we're making. We're recommending. You make the decisions, but we're recommending. This is just to be clear. We do bus for our community partners, especially the after-school programs, before-school programs. We do provide bus services, and the question is, to what extent can we continue doing that? That's a question on the table, and there's not a recommendation in the package. We're not moving forward on that per se, but we wanted to provide some parameters of where we bus and to what institutions so that we can discuss that in more detail. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary to talk about the walking routes and those options, the overall piece about the 1.5 miles, and the viable options that we've generated, and then we'll also provide some background into the before and after school that we'll leave for discussion.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gorn. There's one more slight change that's underneath the chart on page 14 of the packet for the bus stop changes, and that involves Chute Middle School. We're recommending 2 to 3 stops per bus route, which would mean those kids would be walking under 1.5 miles, but we would have fewer stops in certain neighborhoods. And so that would shorten the length of the chute routes as well. And then those buses would be routed more efficiently, and they may be able to be accessed for after-school activity routes and such if we can free them up from running such a long route. So that was just one more change, not included in the chart, but right underneath it.
If I can interrupt just for a second. One of the things that we did, several people have asked or written in, what sort of options did you consider? One of the things we considered, and we actually rejected it, was to eliminate the chute bus completely from the Walker area over to chute. And because we don't technically have to bus middle school kids, and yet that's a long way to go. And then the only other option was that the young people would have had to walk from the Walker area to the high school, basically, and then catch the bus down Dodge and then walk again. And we eliminated that as something that was not feasible and not what we wanted to propose to the board. So that there's a particular case where we considered something within the realm of consideration. We could have proposed that, and we decided to not bring that forward.
And we also looked at the hub and spoke model for bus stops, and that didn't seem viable either because we would be having older kids getting off at elementary school while school was still in session, and we were concerned about the disruption to the school day at those receiving schools. So we looked at expanding the bus routes as an alternative to the hub and spoke model, at least for this point. So as Dr. Gorn said, the district is required, per the school code, to bus students who live 1.5 miles or more from the school that they attend, their school boundaries. In 1982, the school districts were allowed to provide busing for students living in IDOT-approved hazardous areas. So where maybe crossing a busy street, crossing active train tracks, such like that would be meeting IDOT's criteria. So the district, way back in 1982, did have some hazards that came on record, and many of those we don't feel have been updated really since that time. So as we were looking at how we could provide more efficient routing and possibly expand the walk area and reduce the number of kids who were being bused to school, we took a look at those existing IDOT hazards. And as I said, many of them have been on the book since 1982. And they're outlined in my memo and by school. I'm just going to walk through maybe school by school and look at the areas that we found. So let me take a Walker, for example, as the first school. It is shown as Area 1 on the map. We did provide colored maps, which are a little easier to follow along with on the tables. So the area at Walker that's north of Foster, that area has been bused due to hazards. However, we cannot find an IDOT hazard on record from that neighborhood. There are no sidewalks in the neighborhood. The children who live just south of Foster also do not have sidewalks, but the children south of Foster are considered to be in a walk area. So for some reason, the addresses north of Foster were included in the Versatrans system and identified as hazardous busing. So we did evaluate that area, and we found the traffic count to be very low. Again, there are no sidewalks, so children would be walking at the side of the street along until they get to Central Park, and they would be crossing Church with an existing crossing guard and arriving at Walker. So we would just be expanding the walk area to include students living along north of Foster. We have identified, let me see how many children. We have 17 children currently riding in that area. We do have the demographics of those children. We have 13 who are non-free and reduced lunch, 3 children who meet the free lunch criteria, and 1 child who meets the reduced lunch criteria. So 17 children in all are currently being bused from Walker Area 1, and that is an area that we are recommending no longer be eligible for hazardous busing because we don't have a hazard on record. So there is no hazard to really update. It would simply be updating our system. And again, these recommendations would go into effect next year for 2016-17. So that is reviewing the area contemplated for Walker School. Should I take questions on
Why don't
that?
we do that, just so that we
Yeah.
Any questions specific?
Can you come forward and join us at the table and then speak into the microphone, please? And we'd love to have.
I'm sorry, I'm not even from Walker, but
That's
I just
okay.
wanted to clarify something. My name is Bridget Nelson. I'm a parent from Kingsley. Did you say when you were talking about that route that the kids actually walk on the street, not on a sidewalk for a portion of their?
That's correct.
And we're considering that acceptable as a safe route to school?
We did evaluate walking to school from that area in the street to Walker School. We used the IDOT criteria. We measured the length of the distance the children would be walking, the traffic count in an hour, while children would be walking either to or from school. That happened to be an afternoon traffic count, and the posted speed limit. So those are all, IDOT uses a point system, and so the point total for that walk did not equal what would be considered an IDOT hazard.
But
So
without
to kind of
sidewalks.
understand, if it was like 10 feet on a residential street, as a parent or just a community member, you could kind of visualize a child veering off and doing that safely. So it's really hard to imagine sending a child to school, walking off of a sidewalk and encouraging that and calling it a safe route. I mean, at that point, it's like, I don't feel like that's worth the dollars we're saving.
And I'm just
Plus,
simply.
no, right. So, question, that was just a
Yeah,
point of clarification.
thank you, Bridget.
Right.
And
So,
I was just going to say, we should just try to take the comments after
Sorry,
the
okay.
session. I think
Should I stay sitting
to
here?
keep, you may sit there.
Yeah,
Great.
make
I'm
yourself
Happy
at
for
home.
you to sit there.
okay.
But I think what we meant here was questions
Sorry.
from this group.
Oh.
And then we'll take more questions. It's a good question, and I think it probably would have come up from this group too, in more general. So are there questions relative to Walker, like similar to that?
Relating to the safety issue, so I'm a Skokie resident. I live in these neighborhoods that don't have great sidewalks. Have you contacted the Skokie Village at all about whether they plan to have, I mean, because I know that East Prairie just added a whole sidewalk. There's a new sidewalk by Bessie Rhodes. I'm just curious if in like the next 5 years, we will be getting appropriate sidewalks. I don't know the answer to that question, but it'd be interesting to know along some of these routes. It seems like we're adding lots of sidewalks where there have been none in Skokie.
And we are certainly willing to follow up with the building officials at Skokie.
My only question for Walker is, because it's only 17 students, it's the same number of buses,
Right.
what are we really saving? Is
Well,
it shaping 3
right.
minutes off, or like what is?
And the test site, which we are hoping we'll have access to in the near future, will better enable us to determine how, with some children removed from eligibility, how many buses do we think we really would need, and how long would the bus routes be? If you recall, we added a bus at Walker. Walker now has 4 buses. We added it during this year, and we did not add it due to overcrowding, but we had a Walker route that was going well beyond an hour and a half. And we try to keep our bus routes to an hour maximum.
Because of the ESL.
Because of the ESL students who live all over, the area, the routes are longer in length. And so we added a bus, not due to overcrowding, but it'd be to try to keep the route under an hour. So we aren't sure if taking 17 kids off a bus will be able to reduce the bus at Walker or not. We conservatively said we did not think we could reduce the bus. And again, student ridership will change year to year. So we base the numbers in the packet on current eligible students and of those eligible, current numbers of riding students. So.
Is there any thought to just, we're waiting on this test site to determine, so none of these numbers are good then? Or how accurate are these numbers?
These numbers are very accurate. We called and worked with school staff to determine the actual children who are riding the bus.
That you just said that we're waiting for the test site to determine this. How can, no?
The test site will help us determine how long would a bus route be. If we take these 17 children off the route, can we move the remaining kids from that route onto other routes? If we expand the bus stops 1 to 2 blocks for a Walker route, would we be able to move the remaining kids from this bus route onto other existing routes at Walker? I don't know that now. I know there are 17 children living here now who we are busing from Area 1.
But we're going to keep going through schools and we're going to keep referring to the test site. Now, I just feel like we're putting, was it the cart before the horse? Like, there should be more information about this before we make this decision, or before the board is even asked, before it's even asked to move to the board. It looks like there's a gap in the information, I would say, just on the surface. And we can go school by school if you like.
Yeah, well, I think there's also one level of this information, which we do know, is that there would be a reduction of 3 buses, right? We know that. What we don't know is,
For this particular school necessarily.
not
Right,
here.
right.
No, I'm saying overall, right? At this particular school, there would be increased walkers that we don't believe would be a reduction in buses, but it sounds like based on the test site, there could be. So we're looking at the base level of reduction in buses, which is the most conservative. So yes, to your point, we don't have all pieces of information. And I think we should circle back to the test site, the function of the test site, when the test site is going to be ready, and what additional information that would get us, and is it worth postponing decisions, at least on what we do know, and maybe that in what we feel like we can move forward, so that we can start communicating and getting input from the families, which is the concern last year. So maybe we have to break this into a sequenced process. Yeah, that.
We can go back to the next one.
Yeah.
I don't want.
I just have one other question. And going to this whole idea of there are no sidewalks north of Foster, but did I hear you saying that south of Foster, there are also no sidewalks?
That's correct.
So kids are walking.
They are walking.
On the street currently under what we have.
Yes.
So,
Is that true in other areas as well? I mean, are there other schools to which kids have to walk that there aren't sidewalks?
Yes, Lincolnwood is one, and that was one I was going to talk about next.
Okay.
Okay, so this isn't, how typical is it? I mean, would you have any feel for that?
I did a lot of these traffic counts, and I've been in a lot of neighborhoods. I would say more neighborhoods do have sidewalks. There are some that have sidewalks, and then some areas the sidewalk disappears, and then it picks up again. And other areas, such as this area, for Walker, does not have sidewalks in the whole neighborhood. So,
Skokie does not. Right.
It depends on where you are, just like Dr. Brown was just saying. And I think the village has intentionally trying to figure out how to add appropriate sidewalks, especially for ADA really reasons, and curb cuts. So at least in our neighborhood, I think I photographed some new sidewalks on one of the bus routes and sent them to Ms. Ryan.
But there is an IDOT threshold for, because I saw a category for having to walk in the street.
that is correct. That is.
So what you're saying is, in some cases, that could be considered a hazard depending on how far and,
It depends. It's considered a type 2 hazard, I believe, walking on a roadway. It depends on the posted speed limit, the length of the distance where there is no sidewalk, and the traffic count during an hour when children would be walking to or from school.
okay.
Candace, may I raise another meta question before we go school by school?
Sure.
So one of the things that I think came up back in May when we talked about this before was the notion of fee for service or cost sharing and giving parents an option to, figuring out whether that's part of the equation here of we need to figure out the efficiencies, we need to figure out how this affects our budget, but are there ways to opt in for parents? Like, would I opt in as a parent to pay if my alternative was having my child walk in the street? Like, I don't know where that comes into play in this discussion.
I think we should talk about it, because it is a little bit larger discussion, and there's different pieces of that, because we
Right.
have to
It gets to like Omar's question, like how much do you save for eliminating these 17 kids? And would those parents opt in to paying some portion or some cost sharing if that was available? And would that solve the issues that
Right, would it solve the issues, and you have
efficiency and
to
the
be able
budget
to address free and
So
reduced lunch
that-
students as well as full ride students, and,
And that's one level of questions which we should entertain.
Anyway, it
We-
wasn't in any of the materials, and I wanted to put it
yeah.
on the table.
The
So can
other-
I'd like to talk about that after we've gotten through each of the individual schools, if that's okay, because there's a couple other macro issues I think we need to address too.
This
Tracy?
is just small. Did you mention, I might have missed this, how long they're walking in the street for this one?
It was up to 4/10 of a mile, I believe.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead and proceed with Lincolnwood, and we'll
Can
circle
I
back
ask
to
one
it. Does it
large
relate
question?
to
It's a
Walker?
big, broad. The eligible riders and actual riders, are these AM or PM?
I think if a child is riding the bus at all, we consider them a rider. So if they ride in the morning, they are riding that bus. If they ride in the afternoon, they're a rider. And they're eligible based on either the home address or whether they're in an IDOT approved area. So we may have more riders in the morning and less in the afternoon. Bless you.
We use PM because there's actually more riders in
There's
the
more
afternoon
yeah.
than there are in the
Yeah.
morning.
Okay.
Because of
Consistently
after-school
used PM.
Because of after-school programming, there are more riders in the afternoon than there are in the morning. So
The higher number.
But the actuals, whether, if it was in the morning or the afternoon, we did take
Just
them
the
out
PM.
exactly how they
Okay.
are riding.
Yeah, that's what
But these numbers are from the PM.
thank you.
Dr. Gorn, did you want to? No.
No, I'm fine.
So let me talk about Lincolnwood next. There is a hazard that is on record, which is no longer hazardous. We did evaluate crossing the streets, let's see here. Crossing streets where we have four-way stop signs in place now, and this is not hazardous, and we have not been providing busing for this area for some time. There's simply a hazard on record that has not been updated, so we have 0 kids at Lincolnwood who will be affected by this update. We have 0 kids being bused from that yellow area now. There's a hazard on record, but we are not providing busing to the students. So we're not affecting any students with this proposed change.
Okay. Questions about that one? From the table, or Bridget? Okay, let's move to the next.
All right, let me take Kingsley next. It's top and center of the map. This was one of the larger areas. We have 67 children who would be affected by this change. Areas 2 and 3 to the north of Kingsley. The walk area can be expanded to those areas. We have existing crossing guards in place to cross Central, and when that was evaluated, it did not meet IDOT criteria. Again, those crossing guards may not have been in place when these hazards were first developed in 1982, but we certainly do have crossing guards in place, and so we can expand the walk area to Kingsley School. And this is one of the larger schools which would be affected by this change. There's 67 children riding from that area.
Are you going to provide the breakdown?
Oh, breakdown, actually, Kingsley, we had to look up these students individually to get this data, and we do not have the breakdown on the Kingsley demographics. We could see if we could get that by next week.
Okay. You can see it.
Now, we have 3 buses at Kingsley. We are proposing with this change that we would only need 2, so we are anticipating we can get by with 1 less bus for Kingsley based on the numbers. So one of our bus savings is expected to come from Kingsley.
Okay.
Want to go on?
So that solves the budget question. How does it do on the efficiency question for kids and the length of bus rides? Do you know? Do you have some kind of time estimate?
We don't have the test site available, but I think there is a bus route that only goes to the north area here, so it would be reducing a bus route and
Eliminating
Just a
route.
A whole route.
It's eliminating the whole route.
one.
Bus. Bus number 1.
And bus 2.
Is it buses
Which
1 and
one
2
would
or
we-
areas 1 and 2?
You know what?
1 and 2.
It's areas 1 and 2. I don't have the bus route numbers here. I've got all the backup in my office.
Areas 1 and 2.
But do you know which bus route it is, Jordan?
Is that what it's called?
1 and bus 2.
Which bus route or routes go up that way?
I couldn't tell you which one it was. There's 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's bus 1 and 2, but 2 would not be eliminated entirely. The actual bus would still run. It wouldn't run to these areas, is what they're saying.
okay.
All of bus 1, correct?
Well, what we're saying is we could reduce the bus count from 3 buses at Kingsley down to 2.
Down to 2.
We would have 82 children eligible to ride, and we are confident we can get 82 children on 2 buses. But we don't need 3.
Okay. So let's move this, and then we'll quickly come back to your questions.
Okay.
Because we've got...
All right, let me talk about Orrington next, which is just to the right of Kingsley on the map. We are looking at Orrington area number 2. These children would cross Noyes, and then they can cross Ridge with a guard at Central. Again, there is no hazard on record for this area now. Crossing Noyes, there was an incorrect hazard filled out that had kids crossing Ridge and an active train track, but there is no active train track from Area 2 to the school. There is an active train track up in Orrington Area 1, and we're not recommending any changes to that area. So again, Area 2 at Orrington would just be expanded to be included in the walk area. We have 18 students who would be affected by that change. We have 11 of those 18 are non-free and reduced lunch. 6 of them are free lunch, and 1 meets the reduced lunch criteria. So 18 children affected by that change. We don't anticipate being able to reduce a bus at Orrington, but again, once we have the test site up, we can plug in all of the other riders and see how long the bus routes would be to see if there would be any possible reduction, but it does not look like there would be, because we have 99 children still eligible, and putting 99 kids on 2 buses would be extremely crowded. So it looks like we will need 3 buses remaining at Orrington.
Just for clarification, is the test site just a computer model? Is that
It is a
what we were
computer
talking
model.
about?
It takes all of our data in the Versatrans system and lets us just enter bless you, the new number of eligible students and who's riding, and then we could route them. And that system does do our bus routes. They're done.
And are we developing that test site model in-house?
Yes.
And somebody's actually working on it now?
It's a duplicate we're currently using.
So,
And that has to be like,
So how long is it going to take to?
not completed by my department, but it is being worked on. And then we'll need to utilize.
Do we have an ETA, though, is what I'm saying? Because it sounds like so many decisions hinge on that.
How long will it take?
do you know, Jordan, what time frame we're looking at? Is Positive Connection assisting with any of this?
We'll need to assist with it, so it's scheduling them to do the work as well, yeah.
Well, can we come back to that? Because it's pretty important, obviously, that we have some estimated delivery on this test site to validate many of these. Not necessarily the ones we already know the impact, but others. I didn't recall there. I thought for some reason there was some kind of date in the packet, but I guess there wasn't. So let's finish off the last school. I think it's Lincoln is the last.
Yes, Lincoln is the last school.
Come back to these questions.
Lincoln is the last school, and it is the largest one impacted by this proposal. 88 children who are currently bused from areas 1 and 2 at Lincoln can walk. The walk area can be expanded to those areas. We do have crossing guards in place at Main, so the children can cross safely with the guard and join the walk area to the school. So Lincoln School would essentially become a walk area school. Now, there are 6 children who attend Lincoln due to ESL programming who live outside of Lincoln's boundaries, and per our board policy, we would continue to bus those students because Lincoln really isn't their attendance area school. It's a school where we have programming for them. So 6 children would remain eligible for busing at Lincoln, and it is anticipated that we may be able to get those 6 children onto existing special ed buses if we have room available and if it is appropriate. So that's a small number, and we are anticipating being able to reduce 2 buses at Lincoln. So we would have 0 typical buses at Lincoln.
So, Lincoln question. So if the 6 kids can't fit on the bus, then we will have to have.
We would need to have a bus or arrange for a cab or a minivan cab to transport them.
How far, where are they dispersed in the district?
That I don't have in front of me, but they're outside of the school boundaries. And board policy states if a child attends a school for programming that's outside of their attendance area school, that we will provide busing.
It's sort of contrary to everything we're talking about. If we're talking about saving money, but then we potentially are going to bus or cab 6 students.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I almost want to say, how much would it cost just to keep the bus?
$40,000.
40,000.
One bus is $40,000.
Cost to cab 6 kids.
6 kids, Jordan, can you throw a number at that?
$40,000.
No, I want to say that cabbing a kid for a year is the same as a bus.
It's based on mileage, though, so it would probably be, it would, I'm sure it would be less than 40,000. Mhm. And that concludes the update of the hazard review.
Okay. Meg, is this question about Lincoln?
Yeah, so do parents at Lincoln know about this possible change to families? Like parents at Lincoln of the 88 of these potential,
Well,
do they know about
So
this?
there was communication from the principals to the PTA on Friday when this information came out, right? For specifically, I know for Kingsley and Lincoln because of the loss of the buses. Whether that communication has gone to all parents was really, there certainly will be communication to all parents as we move forward through this, but whether there wasn't individual communication from the district to all parents because the decisions have not been made yet.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a great number of parents here.
Yeah, I was
obviously, and I'm
contacted by the Lincoln
really-
PTA folks,
Okay.
and they had also put some information together that I believe they were sending out to families. I don't know if that happened. That was really, that was on them, and so we have been dialoguing back with them individually, and I believe specifically that PTA person couldn't come
I do
tonight.
also know, though, that many of our families who ride the bus may be more challenging to, contact, not accessible on email. So I don't know the communication that went out. And so I think if it went out on Friday and the board meeting's tonight, I just would, I'm a little concerned that we've got a large school that is going from 2 buses to none.
Right.
And
Totally.
there's not one person, I just happen to be Lincoln teacher, but there's not one person here from Lincoln School. When we have 94 potential
88.
94 actual riders who are possibly not going to have that's concerning. So
Well, I
I guess
think-
I would love to hear some other avenues of communication for parents besides just going, because PTAs always have, no disrespect to PTAs, but sometimes it can be challenging to reach parents. And so I would like to.
We should talk about communications
Possibly
going
hear
forward.
about
Because
some
this,
other
again, this
options.
is the first meeting on this topic. This is not the last meeting on this topic. So there will be
It just
opportunities
said
at the board.
action, so I was a little.
No, I mean, I know.
Finance.
Okay, sorry.
It's to send it, the action is to send it to the board, in which case then the board, we can decide what pace we take with the board.
And it
Right.
might have been, or if all the parents knew and the board didn't even know it was proposed, that would also be an odd sequencing as well. So we kind of have to middle that. We want to introduce it. It's not final, it's just something we're considering, but I don't know if you'd put it out as a done deal until we've even looked at it once. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I think the point is, we need to talk about what communications happen going forward. So when we come back to summarizing. So those are the specifics on the actual changes, just now focusing on the hazards or the safe walks. I think we should, before we move to, discussion around other, especially the after-school, which is going to be complex as well, we should take some more macro questions that have come up here or around this and talk a little bit more on those. And then also talk about, if you can reiterate the function of the site, this test site, like what is it going to do for us? What are we hoping to get out of it? And I know it doesn't sound like we know when, but how are we going to figure out when?
Well, let me review, and then you can jump in. So the test site, what we would do is put our current student data in this test site. We would enter kids based on these changes, so we would have less bus riders at these schools, except for Lincolnwood, where we don't have any. And then we would figure out how many, the Versatrans system would take the eligible students who we know are riding, based on data we already have, and route them. And then we could see, can Kingsley manage with 2 buses? We think they can. Does Orrington still need 3 buses? We think they will. So the test site that does routing will enable us to get a look at what the bus routes would look like and the length of those bus routes. So how many kids would be on a bus, and what would the length of the bus routes be? Jordan, do you have any additional information?
I was just going to say that I think the primary function of the test site will just be to be able to give us a better estimate of the efficiencies in time that we would be able to save. But as far as, the numbers are concerned, I don't know that the test site is necessary for that. I know you had asked about Walker to begin with, how much time would we save from those 17 kids? So I just looked at the current, because those kids are all on one route, and that would take like 6 of the 9 stops off that route. So we're left with 3 stops that could probably easily go to another route. So there are some things we can still do without that, but I think the primary function would be to be able to see what kind of time efficiencies we could create with lengthening walk to stops and moving, 3 stops to another route. How would that affect both the route where they were added, and what would what would that look like? So it's a time.
I just just a clarifying question. The reason why we're doing this is to save money? Because we technically don't, I mean, you can always do more than what the law says, right? So that the law is the minimum, we can always do more. So we're doing it, the idea is that this is an efficiency, a budget
But
efficiency.
it's more than, it's potentially saving money. It's also thinking about the routes that have been so long and have been, again, it goes back to my first point about quality. And we think that we have routes that are overly packed with too many stops, and that affects the, if I may, the efficiency of these routes. And so again, this is where the test site really helps us, which is how much time does it save? So that if a child is on the bus for 55 minutes, would they be on the bus for less than 55 minutes, 50 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever? And so that's part of what we're trying to do as well.
How many total routes do we have daily?
Do you know how many routes we have daily, Jordan?
53 routes.
153.
So we're knocking 3 off of 153.
Now, the 153, is that AM and PM?
So that would be.
They each do.
It would be more light. It could be up to 4, but as I would minimally say 2, a morning and an afternoon.
2 per,
Right.
so
Six pairs, it
six
would be
routes.
more. And
6
then
routes.
Yeah, they also run.
3 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon.
So I think it's a good idea to look at this, but I think it seems like it's awfully narrow. If you're talking 150 routes and we're trying to knock 3 off, where's the comprehensive plan to really look at this and say what's working, what's not, what's in your model? Because it doesn't sound like you're getting a lot of bang for the buck.
But we don't know yet what the impact of the changing of distances between, between stops, and if there's other efficiencies. That's not a huge cost saving up, or incremental cost savings, that's what you're talking about. So I mean, for me, the question comes back to, when will this test site be available? And on that side of it, because there's 2 sides of this coin, there's immediate cost savings in terms of reductions of bus routes, $140,000, which we believe
120.
I'm sorry, 120. I just upped it. $120,000. Then there's secondarily, could be potential more bus savings if we're really, really efficient. But at minimum is the concerns that have come up around either on time, when you have to double route buses, right? Improving on-time arrival if you're double routing buses, and reducing the time that kids are sitting on buses. So
I'm really having trouble, I feel somewhat dim-witted, but I'm having trouble understanding how, with 13 schools? No, less than that.
18.
No, in terms of served by buses, we have 153 routes? How does that work?
There's morning and afternoon routes.
Okay.
And then JEH has
Quite a few.
more than 30 routes.
That's not even in here, though.
That is, and when I say 153, I'm including that in the number of routes we run daily.
So how many routes does a typical bus have?
Well, they could have, there's
2 or
going to be a
4.
morning and an afternoon. If
Okay,
they're
so
paired,
I'm
there'll
a
be
bus.
2 morning and 2 afternoons, and then some buses do morning plus, there's how many midday routes? Maybe 10 midday routes for JH, where they're picking up PM kids and dropping off afternoon kids. So there is a bus driver who will do a morning route, a midday route, and a PM route, all on the same bus.
the majority of bus drivers, though, are going to either have 2 or 4 a day. If they're a doubled up bus, they would have 4. If they're a regular bus that just doesn't do 2 schools, they'd have 2, 1 in the
Still
morning.
don't see how that gets you to 153. I mean, if a typical bus driver on one day,
Like, I think, it says 7 routes in the morning and 7 in the afternoon, so there's 14.
okay.
I think Best Roads has around that number. I would have to get the list, I'm sorry, I don't know them by heart.
No, it just seems, how many bus drivers do we have?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just focus the conversation? I wanted to go back to your question around fee for service.
Yep.
Could we do that? and whether that has been entertained and what the advantages, disadvantages, concerns might be around. And let's just think of fee-for-service relative to this set of issues versus the after-school program for now.
Can I make one comment
Yeah.
before we go in that
Oh, yeah.
direction? Just to like put this all in context for us, I mean, every penny counts, for sure. I think we all around this table agree with that. But just to put it in context, $120,000 savings out of a $110 million budget represents about 1%. Right, so, I mean, every penny counts, and it's important to have this conversation, but I just want to put that context number out there. And then to the points about like time efficiency savings, so my 11-year-old, when I was asking him about this and like the potential of walking longer to a bus stop, there's the seat time on a bus, but then there's also like, a child isn't really trading like a time efficiency necessarily in this, and I think that just needs to be stated as well.
So, and I agree that every penny counts. When we look at the budget projections over the next 5 years, somewhere between $3 and $12 million will have to be potentially reduced from our budget.
Exactly.
And so then the question, then every reduction counts. And $120,000 of non-classroom reduction as opposed to essential staff is where the trade-off is. And that's part of what we're putting on the table is a very difficult set of trade-offs if indeed the governor and the state legislature solve the budget problem, if indeed when they do that, we're going to have some burden that we're going to have to pay.
Which is a good segue to talking about cost sharing.
Yes.
Okay, a comment and a question?
Sure.
If I could just comment on the dollar figure of $120,000, I think we need to be clear that we're comparing the amount of savings to what it can be potentially saved. Many of our bus routes are required by law. We can't save those bus routes. Much of our $110 million budget is required. It's not discretionary. We have to have a third grade teacher at all of our schools. So $120,000 compared to $110 million, I don't think that's quite the right comparison. To put in perspective, it's 2 teacher salaries. It's twice the amount that I spend on after-school programming in all district schools for the entire school year. It's about half the amount of money that I spend on all of the summer school programming for an entire summer. $120,000 is real money. That's my comment. I think my question would be for the board is that, it'd be an assistant principal. I think my question would be that I think what we've brought forward is trying to be responsive to current board policy and current IDOT hazard guidelines so if not, is there a change to board policy or a change to our understanding of IDOT hazards that the board would want us to take a look at? And if we're looking to save more money, where might some of those more significant changes be? I think that would be just helpful feedback from the board. If not these changes, which operate under current board policy, what might those changes look like so we can take those back and deliberate further? Bring something back.
First, this is what I would say, and I'll just stick to transportation. To me,
Well,
the idea
please
would
do,
be.
because I don't really want
To
to
me, the
extend the
idea would be you
conversation
would run
beyond
this
that
through
right
your
now.
model, you would have the information, and then you would come to the board and say, here, you don't have to tell the parent, here's what we've done, here's what our model has produced, this is the potential savings, as opposed to bringing it to the board and then saying, we're going to put it through a model, and then we'll know. So I just think that there's like a step that's missing, that's all, the process step of walking through and determining what the outcome is going to be. From a larger picture, I think Claudia raised it. We have 154 routes. How many routes do we really need? Like, I don't know, is the software old? Is there new software? Is there what can we do to figure out how to reduce just specifically transportation? Because it does sound like a lot of routes, and maybe that's the correct number. But I would say that would be just in transportation, would come with a proposal saying, we've looked at all 154 routes, and you know what, it's not 2, it's actually 10, and this could equal that. And so it just sounds like we didn't, and maybe you did, and it just didn't come off that way. It came off like you only looked at a small segment. You looked at this hazard, this is the routes we're going after. So I would say, where do you find the additional money? Take a step back and look at the big picture and look at all 154 routes, run it through your model, and then come back with a proposal that says, here's what we've done, this is what we think the outcome is. let's discuss it.
So
And just to
in-
jump on that, I frankly think, and I wasn't being frivolous with this, I think that it's a matter of the way you communicate routes, because it sounds like routes equals buses, which it isn't. If a bus driver drives 4 of those routes a day, then let's presume that that's what it is. A bus driver drives 4 of those routes a day, that's 38 buses then. And then if you're taking 38 buses, maybe that, 6 out of 38, is a significant amount. But I'm not sure we've been careful enough in defining this, that we're mixing up routes with buses.
I'm confused by what you just said. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. I think that we're taking every trip a driver makes and saying that's a route, okay?
Correct. Right.
But yet, the way it sounds like we're presenting this is that we're presenting those routes as this is how many buses we have, 153 buses. We don't. No. But
No.
the thing of it was, is the 6 were buses, right?
6
Three.
routes.
Get rid of 6 buses.
3.
No,
Three
6 routes,
buses.
3
3
buses.
buses.
And not buses, routes.
Routes.
Is what it's.
So,
But if you're only getting rid of 3 routes, then you're not even getting rid of 1 bus driver. It's 3 buses. It's not routes.
We pay by the route.
the $40,000 is the $40,000 by a route? It's
A
not.
standalone
Okay, so
route.
that's an important clarification. Oh. Because we've always spoken the nomenclature of $40,000 a bus, not $40,000 a route.
An AM
So-
and a PM route, that's
Well,
not paired.
Thank you, Claudia, for bringing this up.
So wait, so one route is, there's one route AM and one route PM. So each time we're talking about eliminating a route, we're actually talking about two.
2, aren't we?
Yeah, there's an AM route and a PM route.
So that's,
But the
so
40,000 is for,
Yes, for an AM and a PM
AM,
together,
not just
correct.
the
That's
AM.
two
At
routes.
40,000 for a route that's not
So
paired.
it's 2 routes, but
Correct. Okay.
I would, I think an important point to talk about when we say we should look at the 154 routes that we have is, I think, going back to John's point of, there are, the orange-colored areas on this map are outside the 1.5 mile. So we can't really look at those routes because by law, we have to provide busing for those. Except that I would argue, we're spending a lot of time here talking about busing. It's obviously an issue, but if we're going to talk about busing, I feel like we should talk about busing. And let's talk about these areas in the orange where we are transporting kids and they're a mile and a half out. And obviously, in Evanston, that raises the issue of the inequities in busing that we have. If we're going to really try to do a comprehensive review and overhaul of busing in our school district, I feel like not to talk about the equity issue is a missed opportunity. So to me, we're talking about all these little things, and I agree, they do add up to real money, but I feel like if we looked at a big picture view, we could be talking about, who knows how much we could be talking about. And with other, it's not just in terms of busing, it's in terms of enrollment, we've been talking about it. Everyone wants to keep punting on sort of the idea of looking at boundary lines, but this is just another example of why, in my opinion, we need to start having the conversation about boundary lines.
And I think, Tuni, you should also bring that up when we get to the point of discussing with the budget task force, the scope and
Yes.
going forward.
Right.
So, because it's an important one that if we want to take it on, we have to take it on. It's attendance mapping really is what it is. It results in busing potentially improvements or changes, but it results in a lot of things. But the source piece is not.
Right, but
is not
right.
The driver, I would hope, wouldn't only be busing to do that.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We've been talking about in other ways where it might make sense to look at attendance areas. And this is just one other piece of that puzzle. So to me, we're talking about all of these things in isolation, but really I feel like we need to step back and take a broader view. And I think it will continue to lead us down the road of, at some point, we're going to have to look at attendance area maps.
I want to come back to Jennifer's question. Can we again, just to that, and then get a chance for folks to speak before we move into the after-school piece? Because some people here, you may or may not want to stay on, you certainly can. We welcome that and your input. But to the point of fee for service, have we looked at that as a consideration? And what would the impact be? I mean, I know we don't know because we don't know how many people might pay, but it's a pricing question.
Right, and it was helpful for some of the schools as you went through about what numbers are free and reduced, right? So that's
Correct.
an overlay on this.
And did we get that number for Lincoln?
We did not.
Oh, do you have that? Lincoln?
Again, we have to look up individual students, so we did not look up all 88 students. We have the schools, a breakout, but that is not specific to the 88.
I think
so-
it would be helpful to find out the number of
Yes,
students.
yeah,
for us.
we plan to do that, but we have to do it on an individual basis. We did not have time to get through all of these, so we did the smaller numbers today.
Okay, I'll put that.
So the fee for service certainly is something that can be entertained. Concerns I have is if a AM and a PM route costs $40,000 and we have one child that wants to pay to ride the bus and they're the only child on the bus, that's an expensive bus route. If we had room on an existing bus anyway, that would be a different story. We could offer seats for a fee. Again, we have a board policy that where we charge certain, if a child meets a reduced lunch criteria, there's a reduced fee, and a child meeting free lunch criteria, we don't charge a fee to. So those are considerations. I'm assuming the same policy would apply if we were charging. We'd have to determine the area we would offer busing to and on what basis. If there's an available seat on a bus that's otherwise running, if it would still be allow the bus to be paired, so it wouldn't be running pushing an hour a route. Those are considerations we could look at.
And that actually goes back then to the comprehensive plan and where we would be once we run the test site. And the question for me, I'm still concerned as well about the efficiencies and the timing of the bus routes, so that when we have a young person who's on a bus for 55 minutes, I mean, that happens. And if that bus is late, that's longer, and that's a long time to be on a bus. So part of the multiple set of variables here are also the timing from home to school and back. But also, I mean, just go back to Mary's point. Some of this depends on the number of kids who would enlist to pay for the service. And so again, if this were in one of those eliminated bus routes, then the $40,000 would have to be split by the kids.
Right. But I guess taking it up a level is, and I don't want to get skewered here, but having it all be fee for service and having some kind of structure. I mean, there's I think the thing that the budget crisis raises for all of us is trying to think outside the box as much as possible. And just because it's been the way we've done it in the past, we may need to,
That's interesting.
would that work?
I mean, there certainly are districts
change
in our
board
area that
policy.
have fee-for-service. They tend to be wealthier districts. And so, we have, I think it's something we should potentially put on consideration.
I mean, we'd have to have
The-
the same sliding scales that we
Right.
have now, but what would the modeling look like on something like that? I don't.
And then you could theoretically
Tracy?
open it up
I just have
to
to
any, it wouldn't
anybody.
we wouldn't worry about hazards or any
That's
of that.
correct.
Well, yeah. You mean-
Except that
You
we
have to
do,
have some level of efficiency in your routes and.
and we do have to provide busing to children who live a mile and a half or further from their school, and we cannot charge for that, so.
Tracy?
I have a small question and then a comment. And the first one is on the Lincoln number 2. It looks to me as though the children south of Oakton, I don't know if you're adding crossing guards or not, but it seems that they have a crossing guard at Maine, but it doesn't look like they have one at Oakton.
They don't.
So that's problematic, I think.
Oakton and Ridge?
No, it's
There's one at Oakton.
Oakton and Chicago Avenue?
Oakton and Chicago Avenue,
Yeah.
or?
No.
I mean, it's west of Chicago. My eyesight is bad, but looks like it's, but anyway, there's a lot on Oakton, but there's nothing in that area, which seems like a bad idea. And the second thing is, I think we could all debate whether $120,000 is significant enough, but I think even putting that aside, if we have not looked at our IDOT hazards since 1981, we should be doing it no matter how much money we're saving, because just for good governance to be looking at that.
Correct.
Efficiencies, so, and I happen to think when you look at it in instructional programs, it actually is enough money that it would make it would be worthwhile.
Okay. Meg, sorry.
Dr. Brown, do you know how far that is, the furthest point from Lincoln to Lincoln, even though you do have them walking down Chicago Avenue?
We do not have them walking down Chicago Avenue. They would be walking,
I'm sorry, my eyes, I don't have my glasses.
they would, Chicago Avenue actually does not have sidewalks in parts of it, so that walk route from the south would be up one of the side streets like Callan or Custer up to Maine. So they would not be walking on Chicago.
So do we know how far the
Oh,
distance is?
it's, you know, we did measure it when we were counting. I don't recall at the moment, but it's not a mile and a half, or it would be depicted in orange.
So from the base of the southern edge, what you're asking is from the southern edge of the Lincoln 2 to walking on the route that isn't Chicago
So
Avenue
it
to
could be a
school.
mile .3.
It could be.
So we could have kindergartners walking a mile .3 in January, and 3, you know, like lots of snow, potentially walking 45 minutes to get to school, and then
But we might have that now.
Yes, we could have that now.
Sure.
We have it
So,
now in
I'm
other
sorry,
places.
let me not pick on Lincoln. So at many of these schools, so yeah, so,
The point is, we do have it now, that this has been kind of outside of that policy because of the perceived traffic hazard previously.
and, so that's because we thought there was a traffic hazard.
Well, no, prior to having crossing guards at Maine, this certainly was hazard, and I believe there is a hazard on record that would need to be updated to reflect the current crossing guard who was there. So back when this hazard was put on the books, I have to think there was not a crossing guard in place at
But
Maine.
that southern part doesn't count because there isn't a crossing guard? Or it doesn't,
Area 1 is included in
about area 2?
The kids would walk
area,
down
they would
probably
walk
Custer,
back to
things.
Maine and cross with the guard.
Okay.
So they, just based on the map, they would not walk on Chicago Avenue. They'd walk on Custer and go up to Maine and then cross at with the safety of the guard at the corner.
Okay, I misunderstood, I apologize.
Okay, I'm going to move to comments from the audience. So we have a list of, and we can double back if there are other questions here from the team. We have a list of folks that's already signed up, so I'll start there. And then if there are other people who want to speak to this particular piece of it, the hazard-related questions, you can do so. We'll limit you to 3 minutes conversation. Are you able to track that, Faye? And so I'm just going to put in the order of the list that's here is Robin Stark is first on the list. If you could, when you come up, just say your name, your address, and school, if you have, school and child affiliation.
And it's helpful to speak into the microphone, please. Thank you.
For everyone who's watching this on television.
My name is Robin Stark, and I'm at 2330 Thayer Street in the Kingsley District. First of all, I wanted to say you were talking about the efficiency of the buses. We had a lot of problems last year. It's been great this year. One time, for instance, one of the bus driver wasn't there, which was always a recipe for disaster. Right on time, the sub was right on time. We were totally impressed. He was going the wrong way on the street, but he was there. And I don't mean the wrong way. He was following all the rules. So we haven't had any problems with that. I have a daughter in first grade, and I just want to say that I completely understand that budget cuts have to be made, but I would like to argue that eliminating bus service for some students will impact, I'm sorry, I'm misreading my notes here. I don't think that making cuts where we are going to impact so many students, not just those riding the bus, but the safety of students at the schools, this type of bus cut will impact all of the students because so many more people will have to drive. We talk about a walking distance of 1.5 miles. My background's in urban planning, and I've spent years working on creating walkable communities. And in my field, the rule of thumb is a 1/4 mile walk. People will walk a 1/4 mile somewhere. And the only place they'll walk a 1/2 mile is to a very big location, such as a train station. Even a bus, only a 1/4 mile radius. And so to hear that IDOT is using 1.5 miles really surprised me, especially for kindergartners and first graders. My first grader, there's no way she could walk 1 mile plus. She's exhausted. The couple times we've done it, she can't function at school properly. She's exhausted. And so I will, even though sustainability and walkability is the core of my career, I would be driving her. And I think that the schools are already so crowded, at least I don't know the other schools, but Kingsley is packed at pickup and drop off. And I have some photos here that I just wanted to pass around. There's a link to a YouTube video that a friend of mine took of pickup this afternoon. The first, what's that? That was today. Ann Brown took the video for me. But the first picture shows two people double parking on one side, single parking on the other, a bus trying to get through. It's a mess. And I think that when we're talking about $120,000 savings potentially, we have to think about the infrastructure changes that are going to need to take place in order to make these places safer for that many more cars. And also, there may be other changes that need to be made, more soft changes, such as, one solution could be to increase the monitoring time on the playground so that people can stagger their drop-off and pick-off. But then you have to hire somebody to do that. And there are going to be costs, and I think I'd like to see more information about how those costs are going to impact that $120,000, because I know from my experience, infrastructure costs are big. They're one-time costs, and we're talking about $120,000 a year, but they're big. So I just wanted to say that.
Robin, I'm sorry, you're 3 months
Oh,
up, so
yes.
if you could close
and
off.
I think that's it. That's everything. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I have Andrew Schoenhall. Oh, another neighbor.
It's a made-up name, Schoenthal.
Schoenthal.
I'm Andrew Schoenthal, and I'm a father of a fourth grader at Kingsley and a rising kindergartner. I'm extremely disappointed about this committee's proposal to radically alter and reshape transportation in this district. Although the proposal is framed as an attempt to modernize D65's transportation regulations and procedures, it is actually a hollowing out of the district's bus service. This is not a revitalized transportation scheme, it is a gutting of the school's bus system. I understand there are reasons to find a more efficient bus system, but the most efficient bus system is one without buses and without stops. I urge the board to vote against moving this proposal forward. First, working parents like my wife and I depend on the school buses to help us balance work and being a parent. The loss of a bus transportation for families like ours is yet another difficulty in managing our schedules. Second, for a city that claims to be green, this proposal will increase traffic, especially around the schools. For example, the drop-off area around Kingsley and Haven is already a mess. Putting additional cars in this narrow street will exacerbate the problem. I just wonder if other departments have been consulted regarding this, such as residents near the school, the police, or fire department. I also find it particularly galling that last year this district closed the school due to extreme cold. Supposedly these closings were in the interest of our children, to protect them from the cold weather and ensure their safety. Yet here we are 1 year later with a proposal that eliminates routes. How do you reconcile this? Will our schools be closed down more often because of cold weather and a lack of bus transportation? And while I understand budgets are what budgets are, and the state of Illinois it has a budget problem, to say the least, to move forward with this proposal, but yet not have a sense of the exact dollar amounts that you're talking about, seems a little bit too fast. But let me end with this. My 4-year-old daughter often sees her brother off to school every day, and for the past 2 years, she goes outside, of course wearing her backpack, and eagerly waits the arrival of Kingsley bus number 1. And she usually gives him a big hug and kiss, or sometimes a push, before her brother gets on the bus. She's actually looking forward to going to kindergarten next year, and a large part of her excitement actually has to do with riding a bus with her older brother. And while I do not expect fiscal and transportation policies to cater to the whims of a 4-year-old or even a 40-year-old, This proposal is penny wise and pound foolish. The savings, which are not even well defined at this point, seem relatively light when compared to the increasing commuting costs, increased traffic, and most importantly, increased stress on the lives of working parents. I urge you not to move forward with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, just, I know we typically don't comment against this, but just because you did raise it specifically, we do have a meeting scheduled this Thursday with Alderman Tendom and Alderman Grover, as well as members of the city staff and myself and members of our staff to start talking about the congestion issues. And that's one of the reasons why we believe this has to be a collaborative effort, and we need to work with the city to alleviate that, not because it exists today, but also going forward.
I just, look, I'm all about saving money, but it seems to me that this proposal is not ripe for moving forward from beyond this stage, when I understand the whole point of a test site, which actually just sounds like a computer program where you input data, but has a fancy name, I guess. But to me, to move forward with a proposal that is impacting a lot of families, with not to have an understanding of the true costs and the ramifications of this, and to send it to the board for whatever it does, I just don't think this pie has been baked yet. But even if the pie was baked, and you actually had an actual numbers that you could provide and the exact number of routes that would be eliminated or the number of buses that would be eliminated, I think, again, in a budget that's $100 million, I understand that a lot of the money is set aside for certain exact things and certain things that are mandated by the state. I guess, for me as a taxpayer who's never actually spoken in front of a public meeting before, the buses are an important part of why we move to the neighborhood that we move to, the schools, the community. And I think this is just a very transparent attempt to save money in the easiest way possible. And I would urge you to
Thank you.
not move
Thank
forward.
you.
Thank you.
At least we're being transparent. I appreciate that. So next up, we have Lindsay. I don't know what it says there. Shen Cohen. Lindsay Cohen. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Cohen. I'm at 2417 Thayer Street. I'm also a Kingsley parent and the parent of one Eli Cohen, who came with me and is the reason that I'm nervous about speaking in front of my 6-year-old. So Eli is a very precocious first grader, and he's also an older brother of 2 future Kingsley Comets, hopefully. Unless you redistrict us to 2 schools that are actually within walking distance, both Willard and Lincolnwood are actually significantly closer and much safer walks to my house than Kingsley is. I'm not suggesting that I'm advocating for that change, but it seems like the cart is pulling the horse a little bit in this situation. I agree with whatever board member brought up the fact that it seems like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to figure out an efficiency of getting kids to the right schools in a safe manner, and it seems like this is just being done in a bit of a backwards manner, with all due respect. I 100% appreciate everything that you guys all do, and I see the late hour that we're at already, so thank you for everything that you do. But another thing to point out about Eli is that he spent 2 years in astronaut training school to help him with significant gross motor delays. And luckily, we've been able to avoid having him be on an IEP. But if he had to walk a mile to school back and forth, I can tell you that he'd have to have an IEP. And so, sorry. It's incredibly important to parents like me whose kids are on the cusp to have the bus available to us when we live as far away from the school as we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think your son's probably very proud. Bridget Nelson. Oh, look, it's Bridget Nelson.
I'm Bridget Nelson, 27.
She recently ran for the school board.
I did.
She's now.
I lost, so then I just crashed I live at 2720 Broadway, and I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner and a future Comet. I won't say much because these guys really covered everything and did a great job. I feel like those pictures speak 1,000 words. I can say that just from the McCullough Park neighborhood, where myself and many of the people behind me live, we are in the area that's marked 2 on the Kingsley map. We estimate that there are 30 kids that use the bus within 20 families. Even if we carpool, we're looking at adding, because it's just not efficient to carpool when you have 3 kids and maybe you're going to grab 2 more. Like, not many people would actually be able to do that. Our group alone would add 15 cars to that mess. It wouldn't be safe. It's a moving parking lot with little bodies kind of moving in and out of cars. We then approach Haven that's getting out at the same time. It's a mess. There's older kids just kind of roaming around. I don't know what you do to fix that. Occasionally we see traffic enforcement out there. There's nothing for them to do because there's nowhere for the cars to go. You can't park in the neighborhood. There aren't 15 extra spots within a reasonable distance. People are doing U-turns on small streets. They're driving illegally down alleys. They'll park in the main Kingsley parking lot, which we're not supposed to do, but that'll block the buses. It'll cause a huge headache. I would completely agree that no small child should be walking from our neighborhood to, I see 4th graders doing it, that works. No 1st or 2nd grader is going to do that. The average age of the kids on the bus, they're kindergartners, 1st, 2nd graders, a few older kids. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Sorry. It just won't happen. People will choose to drive and add to the congestion. And lastly, I had a really great point that now I'm forgetting, but I've talked to many people from my neighborhood and around town. We would be, if this is what it comes to, pay a fair and reasonable fee, treat it like hot lunch, give it, fee for services, give us the chance to do that. You'd have a lot of people from our neighborhood. It would be efficient. And I know that the people from the community, Dr. Smilowitz, I know you communicated with her from Northwestern about doing some efficiency studies. My husband also does transportation planning. And as we've already said, there must be another way to get at this to sort of still, so we can still live within the busing model that the school district lives within, and meet the needs of all the students and get people to school safely. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
I have Colette Allen next. Do you want to wait till, okay. Trudy Shaw? Trudy Shaw here? No? Okay. Then is there anybody else from the group now that would like to speak? Why don't you come up, ma'am? Could you come and tell your name, and then you next? Sorry, I have to say you, but I don't know your name until you get up here.
I'm a mom of 3. I answer to you. So. My name's Carrie Von Hoff. I live at 2736 Bryant Avenue, and I am the mother of a 4th grader and a 2nd grader at Orrington, and a kindergartner next year at Orrington, who also is very excited about school, and one of those things is the bus. The model that I read, and I don't know if that's a final model, said that there were 18 affected riders at Orrington. There are 16 regular riders in my neighborhood, so I'm here on behalf of all of them. It looks like our neighborhood kind of takes the brunt of the Orrington swipe, yet the bus, there's not a bus elimination at Orrington. For our neighborhood, the children have to cross an L crossing that's at street level. That's not guarded by a crossing guard. That is on the map. Y'all can look at that. I have some expanded screenshots that I'd be happy to share with whomever would like them. In addition, the children are crossing the canal. Yes, there's a bridge there, but that's still a dangerous spot for very young children like my future kindergartner to be going on. Furthermore, yes, there is a crossing guard at Ridge and Isabella, but every time I have witnessed this individual, he has been listening to headphones, so I question whether he's really engaged in that role and can really be providing safe crossing for these very young children.
Yeah, I think she's here.
I agree with.
That's not what we're eliminating, right?
We're not eliminating, we did not discuss Orrington Area 1. I think that's where you must live in if you're speaking about the
I know
crossing.
there's markings that is showing that we're on a proposed walking
No,
route.
Area 1 at Orrington is not going to be touched. There are active train tracks up there. That is not a change that we're ever considering.
You know, we were very confused then by the mapping because it looked to us like we were going to be cut off.
Oh, you do see it on the map, but the memo only addresses Area 2 at Orrington, and we have evaluated the walk to school with the guard that is in place for those children. We're not anticipating a change or recommending a change for Area 1 at all.
Okay, it just, the way the map is drawn, it looks
Sure.
very, very confusing, so that's why
Okay.
Yep.
these families had that concern.
Got it.
Understandably.
I appreciate your clarifying that.
Would you like to continue and finish your 30 seconds?
I
or-
mean, I do want to continue to reference the fact that we need to look at how well these crossing guards are doing, because the one at Ridge and Isabella, you know, I understand y'all don't have control over him, but that's a problem for people who do need to use that area. And that's my opinion about
Thank you.
that. Thank
I
you.
would definitely, we can follow up on that. I would also strongly encourage you to call folks to call 311.
Thank you, we will definitely do that.
I do that myself. The city does, you know, fund the crossing guards and is responsible for them, and it's important for them to hear when they're not doing what
Engaged.
is expected.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes. Yes, please. Although I said I would take this fine lady here next.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Neil Graham, the 2000 block of Wesley. I actually am in Area 2 of the Orrington District. I see a unique thing about Area 2 of the Orrington District. It appears to be the longest distance for walking of the proposed cuts. We're looking at well over a mile from that neighborhood to Orrington School. I don't see a comparison there. There's also 3 busy streets to cross there: Noise, Ridge, and Central. There's no proposed crossing guard at Noise and Ridge, which I think is a problem. I also question the fact that this proposed area of cut is right on the border of an orange area that will continue to need bus service at the 1.5 mile mark. How much savings is there when the bus already goes down there? Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. And that orange area is an Orrington area?
Yes, it is. And that is hazardous because those children would have to cross Green Bay Road, and there's no intersection.
Out.
And it is a mile and a half.
Thank you. Ma'am, please come forward. And Terry.
My name is Amanda Ripp. I'm in Kingsley School District in Area 2. I'm here with a bunch of neighbors. There are a lot of us in the area. I guess my first question is, where do you find these IDOT criteria? I mean, I do a lot of work with the Department of Transportation, and I called them and asked them, and they had not heard of it. So is there, Dr. Brown, is there any place you can point to the website?
I believe this is called the School Safety Busing and Instructions for Submitting Findings. It should be on the Illinois Department of Transportation website, IDOT. This is called School Safety Busing.
And so are the criteria for example, I think I just heard you saying things that crossing Green Bay Road is one of those hazards that for Orrington on the other side of Green Bay, you would not be suggesting the children to cross. Obviously, for Kingsley, you're crossing Green Bay, you're crossing Lincoln, and I think you have to add all the commuter traffic that's happening there with all the people who are parking to get on the train. And then you have to take into account essentially the blind corners where you're waiting to cross the street and you can't even see the traffic, or the traffic's literally inches from you because the sidewalk is so small at that, because of the train tracks. So I'm just kind of curious that the IDOT criteria actually thinks it's okay and appropriate to be crossing Lincoln to get to Green Bay you know, like Poplar to Lincoln and then crossing over to Green Bay. I understand there's a crosswalk person there. And I will say for Central Street, I've never seen a better crosswalk person ever. I mean, the woman before was great, the person now is very good too. But I'm kind of curious, I'd like to be able to find the criteria because I was not able to find it. So school, it's on the website. You think it's under school safety busing route?
That's
or?
the name of this publication, and I happen to have a copy that I've had for a while. I would assume it's on IDOT's website.
What's the date of it?
Oh, it's on ISB, Illinois State Board of Education.
Okay, so it's
ISB.
Okay, ISB.
ISB.gov?
.net.
.net. ISB.net. ISBE.net.
And what is the date of the packet you have?
This is in, excuse me, 2001, December 2001.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Terry, Ms. Shepherd, sorry.
Terry Shepherd, 150 Barton, grandmother of child at King Lab Kindergarten. Okay. I listened to all the parents speak here, and I'm assuming they all have children who do exactly what they've been told to do. They're going to walk. They're going to walk the route they're supposed to walk. They're going to cross to the crossing guards. Now, I happen to know, I don't think all kids do that. And looking at this map here, I'm talking about Lincoln now. When you come all the way down here, I know this is the Clyde Cowan neighborhood. I can't remember the name of the east-west street, but there's a viaduct that cuts under the L tracks right there at Chicago Avenue, Mulford. That's a shortcut. I would think that a kid would recognize who has to now walk from here to Lincoln. So they're going to come out of Mulford, they're going to go under that underpass, and you have to cross Chicago to get over in front of the cemetery. I think that right there is creating a very dangerous experience. And then as a mother of kids who's seen their kids play tag on the way home from school, and now you get to this spot that's 4/10 of a mile where you don't have a sidewalk. First of all, let me say, I don't even know how long 4/10 of a mile is, but I'm gonna guess it's about half block, a block. So you got this area where now the kids are forced to go out into the street because there's no sidewalk. You got a good game of whatever going and somebody runs out into the street. Let's say they get hit. Are you opening yourself up for lawsuits if you've taken a kid off a bus, putting him on the sidewalk to walk, and because of that he's hurt? That's my question. And that's it.
The proposed walk route that we have looked at does not have kids walking on Chicago at all.
No, I know. I know you don't.
You started with, that's expecting them to do as they're told.
Look, yeah, if you're expecting them to do as they're told, right here, you're expecting them to walk up to Main Street and across. And I'm saying the average kid is going to look for a shortcut. And for those kids down there, that's a great one. They're just going to do it. Right. And I'm just saying, you know, you've created an extremely hazardous situation there because on the west side of the street, there is no sidewalk. So they got to run across Chicago Avenue to get on the sidewalk, which is going to create the sidewalk that now they can go through the neighborhoods. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask again for Trudy Shaw, and if not, is there anybody else who wanted to? Can I talk briefly? Sure. If you could just state your name and your address.
My name is Dawn Koenigsnecht.
Oh, hi, Dawn.
Hi. Apologies for being late. I am at 650 Michigan Avenue in the Lincoln District. I have 3 boys that all attend Lincoln. They do not take the buses. But I watched some of this on TV, I missed part of it, so my apologies for not knowing everything that's been discussed. But I just did want to point out that I want to make sure that the Lincoln families, because there's a significant number of them, With 88 children being bused, it essentially eliminates the buses. The buses to and from school, and then also is, for the most part, eliminating the before and after care busing as well. Make sure that they receive communication. So the first piece of communication that they received was from the PTA last night in our TWAL, our weekly newsletter. And then we also posted it on Facebook today. I don't know if that reached any of those families. And so I just want to make sure that, they're kept in the loop, and we'll try to do a better job over the next week, depending on what happens today, in trying to reach them. But I don't even know if they're members of the PTA, if they subscribe to our Facebook page.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we reach them, and sort of what the communication plan will be, since I feel like Lincoln is sort of the most affected by the number of cuts and the number of riders.
Thank you. And we should speak to what the planned communication would be. I mean, that's obviously is going to somewhat be driven by what we do next. But thank you, Dawn. Is there anybody else? Okay. So I think given this is the area that we're being asked as a committee to take action on, before we move into a discussion around the before and after school supports, we should close out on this of what we want to do. So I try to summarize a couple of the things that I'm hearing, and please, those here can help me. So in terms of key thoughts or concerns relative to moving forward with the recommendations on the hazards, the new walk zones, and extending pickup stops by 1 block for younger children, 2 blocks for older children. That's really what we're talking about primarily here. And the chute bus. The concerns I'm hearing are in the area of the benefit around efficiencies. We don't really know, because we don't know what the results of this test site will be. My question to you all is, how quickly can we get data from the test site? Is it reasonable that would be able to happen for the next board meeting, for another board meeting? We need some order of magnitude and time frame on that.
I'd say that it would, when we talk to Positive Connections, the person who could test this data for us, she said she would need at least a week to do her part after the database is set up and all squared away with the correct information.
Okay.
So just a point of clarification, Positive Connections, the bus company, does the bus routing.
The routing. So we have to give them the data, and they do the routing. So that's one point.
Which is clearly, by next Monday, we won't have those.
Correct. So I think that can potentially affect when we think this, if we believe it should go forward, when we think we should next discuss it. There's the concern around, I will say, residual impact of congestion and traffic and other, impacts of these changes. A question around what is the viability of fee-for-service, either for those bus services that are being eliminated, or for existing bus routes that would continue that we're eliminating riders on effectively, and could we offer that? And then the two larger pieces, which is looking at this at a more macro level in terms of transportation and across all of the bus routes, what are other efficiencies that we might gain? And I think to Suni's point, the busing issue as a whole and how that connects with attendance area mapping and those changes. So, did I miss any other big concerns or issues that have been raised? Or little ones?
So Positive Connection makes our routes, and then we pay them, and they get paid by the number of routes we have.
Don't they?
This is the first year they've made them, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
they did help us at the beginning of the year to do the routing. The day-to-day stuff is done in the transportation office, but it was written, correct me if I'm wrong, as a part of the bid, and there wasn't a fee for the routing portion.
I think the bigger question is, has there been a significant increase in the number of routes? There's been.
Why don't you tell us that, Jordan?
Last year was 165 every day.
Okay.
So we reduced a little more than 10, 12.
So they haven't recommended to us that we should have more routes.
The
But
chart
good,
at the end, though, shows more routes.
yeah, that I think we should hold to the
Okay. All
FYI
right.
question,
So
because
it's-
that's a data question.
Okay.
Do I see that there's another speaker? Okay.
Do they charge us?
Can you still come forward? Sorry, Jeffrey, but otherwise you're used to being on TV. Come on.
Kingsley, do they charge us $40,000 per route? Is that where that number comes from? Like they bill us $40,000 per route?
They bill us per route per day. There's just a fee for.
So if you calculate it out, I mean,
Yeah.
that's in the numbers. It
Correct.
does work out to $40,000.
An AM and a PM route that are not paired with other routes. So a standalone bus that only does one route in the morning and goes home in the afternoon, an AM and a PM route all year long would be about $40,000.
That's correct.
So we have about a $6 million budget line for buses? Is that right?
Seems
If you multiply
5 point
150
something.
whatever by 40,000, it's about $6 million.
It's somewhere in the 5+ range. Okay, so there are any other larger issues?
So,
Did I miss something?
Go ahead.
that was an amazing summary of the big picture things, but communications.
Oh,
And how
yes,
things are being
sorry.
vetted, and it was great to hear that you're also talking with some city officials, so.
Before we get to communications, can I just pose one other way to look at this, and maybe a question that we need to add to the list of things that we need to look into. And I say this as, somebody who my child would be losing bus service by this proposal. So I understand the concerns. But another way to look at this is that we, absent IDOT hazards, we're providing a service to some families that we aren't necessarily providing to others. And so is that fair? So that raises the question, and I mean, I don't know how easy or difficult this would be to do, but maybe, are there other schools, like when Meg was concerned about, the kindergarten who has to walk 1.3 miles? Well, are there kids in other schools? I can't tell from the map, and I'm very bad at estimating these sorts of things, but what is the longest
What's the longest
walked
distance?
with schools that don't currently have routes?
Irrespective of this change.
Right, exactly. Because if we aren't providing those families with buses, to me, that's another thing that we have to consider about in terms of whether or not we're going to continue these. And if the walk routes are much less at these other schools or there aren't buses, then maybe that's when we're looking at the fee for service. Or even if we do choose to look for the fee for service, maybe it needs to look at these other schools and say, well, we're going to say anybody over a mile will offer a fee for service opportunity for busing. That to me is the only fair way to do it, not to just look at, well, this is how it's been done because there used to be IDOT hazards and now there aren't, but only for, certain areas. Like we either have to look at it for everybody or, otherwise, I think it raises questions of, well, why for certain areas are we providing the service and not others?
Yep, that's a very good question around fairness. Can you speak to the communications question in terms of what you've already planned, or what communications would be or planned to happen should we move forward with these actions? I guess that's a lot of shoulds, but.
Should we move forward, and should you vote out of committee to the board, and should the board vote that this was?
Well, I think there's two places. There's if we move it out of committee and it goes to board, there could be communications, more lengthy communications that this is up to the board. I mean, there's different stages of potential communication. So what is planned, and then we could respond as to what we think would be ideal. And in a couple minutes, we're going to have to take a quick break.
What is planned is, if this were to go out of committee and go to the board next week, then in terms of the transitions and the changes that would be made, we would be working in community forums with the community. Now, I think that falls short at Lincoln, and with Dawn's points earlier, we'd have to actually think very actively of, between now and next Monday, could we have that the level of communication that we're at least providing here, so here are the facts, so that community members could come forward. Mary, do you have other plans?
I think communicating through schools to try to touch the parents affected. We can send letters home if families may not have an email. I think multiple communication forms would be ideal.
But those are planned post-decision.
Those are planned post-decision, so
So the
that,
question would be, do we believe there should be any incremental communications
prior to-
pre-decision?
Decision, right.
To at least make sure everyone has an equal level, or we attempt additional communications out there. So,
I mean, just again, to be honest, as we don't have the test site where we would be able to provide data to the board by next Monday,
Yep.
I don't want to overpromise that between tomorrow morning and Friday, we would have opportunities to do the type of communication that you're suggesting. So
Right.
it would take us some time.
well, I think I'm asking, I really wanted to understand what you're planning, because I think I would like to come back to the committee and ask what we think is the right communication. I know we have your very important opinion, Meg, but is there anybody else here that has, if in decisions like this in the past, when we bring something to a committee that is then going to go to the board, what is the role of communication? That's the purpose of having public meetings, right? And communicating out what's going to happen so that folks can come in and offer comment. What beyond that do we believe is the appropriate level of communication that we should pursue between now and the pre-decision communication specifically? And does anybody have strong feelings on that?
So my first
Did
thought
I-
is, my first thought is, if the board already knows which way we're gonna vote, then, I guess if you're telling people to come to the board next board meeting to expose their feelings, will that sway the vote? When will they speak? Because like right now, we had the discussion and they spoke. So if we're gonna propose board action, we're gonna approve it, and then they speak with.
Well, at the board, they typically speak before the actions are taken, right? So, Tracy, why don't you?
Well, I'm just thinking about timing and what we would do tonight. I feel like to vote something out of committee, we need to have a concrete proposal.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we have that tonight. So I don't actually think I don't think we should vote this out of the finance committee. That's not to say I don't think we should put it on the agenda for a board meeting, because I actually think that reaches a wider audience, and I think it should be at a board meeting. But I don't think it should be something voted from finance as a proposal to the board meeting, but we should put it on, probably not in a week, because what we're all asking for is more information that we won't have. But we should put it on in January with the test site information, not having said it's now coming to a vote, but it's for a wider viewing audience and with more information, hopefully having something concrete enough that within a couple weeks we could vote.
So then the question is, if we do that in January, just to play this out, and hopefully, because I don't want us to get to the point where we were last year, that when we decided it was,
Yeah, I know.
yet again, it was too late.
Right, and that's why we're coming forward today.
I actually think we might want to add a board. We have really scaled back. It
Right.
might be fine to add something.
But we don't have to bring it back. My question was going to be, do we have to bring this back to finance and then go back to the board? If we take it to the board and we talk about it in January, and then a subsequent board meeting, we
Would
take
that be enough
action.
time?
Would
Would February be enough time to then?
So that's a question to you all. If we came back to if it ultimately played out that we weren't going to make an ultimate decision until the February board meeting, which is somewhere in the middle of,
But technically, if we had all the information by the January meeting, we could make a decision then as well, couldn't we?
But I don't think we really have a proposal to vote on that would be baked in. I don't think we would know what we'd be voting on walking in, which would then really not give us enough time
No,
to say.
I'm assuming that we would have the information and a recommendation on what to.
Yeah. If we had, I don't feel at all ready to recommend it going to the full board for decision. I'd feel very comfortable saying, okay, because of the wider viewing that, more input, a lot of what was said here tonight was important, I think, and should be considered. And there's two things. We have enough time to get more people to that January board meeting, so we can get that input. And even after that, if we voted to go ahead with something in February, there's enough time to notify the families that would be affected.
Is that enough time for them to enact it?
That's the question. Is that enough time for us does February, what does February do?
Jordan, do you think by February we'd have the test site up and running so we can enter who the riders would be to take a look at the routes?
No, we said
Yeah,
January.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me,
We're saying if
January.
the decision's made by February, does that give ample time to execute against that decision? And communicate, educate, implement, such that it would be ready, whatever changes were enacted would be ready for the new school year?
I mean, I think we could do that. I don't want to be the only one to, because we're looking at both notifying, we'd have to make the changes first in the system to be able to figure out who is now eligible and who is not, and then notifying the changes. And also, I think you were going to mention too, getting, if we plan to do.
Can you speak into that? I'm sorry.
Confirmations for next year in order to do true, to
know
only
what's
be routing truly
for the following
eligible
year. Yeah.
students. Is it on? Yeah, I think it is.
So I guess the question for us is, which I want to continue to entertain until next week and we can come back to the board, is does February give us enough proper time to be able, if we're making a decision, to be able to communicate and execute with the eligible riders? That's one piece. And so can we're going to need to come back and say that we're either okay with February or we're not. And if that's the case, then we'd have to accelerate a series of community engagements at the test site and move forward for January. And I think within the week we can make that claim and come back.
Okay.
I feel like we need the test site data to make the decision.
Correct.
Yeah. So wouldn't it already be done?
Yeah, I think we're
I mean,
saying
so
for January.
for February.
She's saying by January it would be done.
January, having the data.
Yes.
Okay, so why do we have to run it again?
No.
No, once the decision would be made, all the changes would need to be made in the actual database to produce who is actually
But it wouldn't be effective until the fall.
Correct.
You're doing it in a test site, and then it have to be done in the production site.
We would want to do pointed communication.
Two different
to
sites
the
to do it.
affected families.
To the question of, would the 3 or 4 months remaining, Claudia, like if we made a decision in February, March, April, May, June, would that be enough time to do everything you need to do to actually get this thing up and running in a new, different way? That's all that.
Sounds like yes, but let us reserve the right to analyze that. I think the other piece here is we don't want to go beyond February.
Right, okay.
We could also use the 8th, the finance meeting on February 8th as a finance/working board meeting and vote.
Sure.
As opposed to the 22nd.
Wait till later in the month.
That would give us it would speed it up by
That's
2
helpful.
weeks.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you. All right, so I don't think we will have the question answered about districting, but we should bring that up to a little bit later in the discussion. So,
The fee-for-service
Yes.
overlay.
right, and I think that's something that should be included in this discussion, and options around, and I think trade-offs or whatever, whatever the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, thank you all. What we need to do now is move to the discussion about a similar series of questions and possibilities, but with respect to after-school and before-school supports that we realize that we are providing that is not necessarily consistent with our current policy, but want to talk about that as well. That's not, well, nothing's going to go forward today, so that's awesome. These are just thoughts that may need further analysis. I think the focus of our conversation should be what other additional information do we need, and to be able to assess this particular area. Would you like, Colette, do you want to join us? I think you're the primary folk here that's going to be speaking to this as a partner of ours.
And again, in this specific case, we outline the students that we bus to and from childcare locations, and we really wanted to get feedback like we just got on what some of the impacts would be and what some of the concerns are, so that as we consider the whole, we would know which way to go.
Well, I had some questions. The first question I had was a foster reading program included in these numbers? Because I don't think they were. That is held at Family Focus, but it is run by the YMCA. And I don't see those numbers reflected here, because I know for a fact that there are more kids coming from Lincolnwood.
And they're bused.
And our bus
And
from
they're
Lincolnwood?
bused.
Okay.
They're bused as families, because the kids from K to 2 go to foster reading. The kids from 3rd grade and up come to Family Focus. But they come to the same building.
Can we just back away from this for a second, just to have some setup so you can describe, because this is a great table, but it can be a little confusing. So I would love an overlay of what it is and what it tells us, Mary, and then
Sure.
we can dive into it.
So this chart was depicting the distance from the school to these are all after-school childcare programs. There are no morning programs that I'm aware of. So the distance from the school to the program, and then the number of children currently being bused to those programs.
So run through a number or two just so people can understand it.
Let's see. Well, at Dawes, for example, there are 4 children attending the YMCA program. That program is 1.9 miles from the school, so that does meet with the current board policy criteria. It is more than 1.5 miles. Dawes also has 3 children attending either Fleetwood or Family Focus. That distance from the school is 2.1 miles, also in line with current board policy.
And so to kind of reinforce what the policy is, because it in and of itself is a bit confusing.
It is.
The childcare location is more than 1.5 miles from school, and if the location is along the district's regular routes.
Correct.
It's supposed to be an and, not
Yes.
an or, correct?
Correct.
So in the case of Dawes, certainly it's more than 1.5 miles. Is YMCA on a Dawes
It
route?
very well could be, because Dawes has ESL or TWE programming, so the bus routes do go a longer distance at Dawes.
Okay. So it might not be a route that's in that natural attendance area, it's just if it exists as a route for the school. Okay.
And I could just do another quick example of Lincolnwood. So we have 4 children currently going to the YMCA, which is 3 miles from Lincolnwood. Certainly it meets the 1.5 mile criteria. However, a Lincolnwood bus would not be normally going to that area, because Lincolnwood does not have programs that exceed outside of their school boundaries. And
That's what the
that's why it's
asterisk
shaded.
refers
Yeah,
to at
the
the
asterisk
bottom?
refers to that Lincolnwood does not have programs like TWE or ESL or ACC, where a child may attend from outside of the school boundary. So even though the YMCA has the 1.5 mile plus as at 3 miles, it is not an area that a Lincolnwood bus would typically go.
Okay.
And so the board policy, which is somewhat confusing, would affect the Lincolnwood routes. Lincolnwood has 1 child going to Fleetwood or Family Focus. That is 1.5 miles. Again, it meets the criteria on distance, but it's not an area where the bus would typically go.
Okay.
And
Okay. So now we understand what the data is supposed to say.
So it isn't an or, it's an and.
It's an and. The policy is an and, as it's currently written, yes.
And my understanding is Fleetwood has their own buses?
They, when we talked to the director of the after-school program for Fleetwood, they indicated that they're using a mixed model where they use us for some kids, but that they do have their own buses that they use for additional kids. So they are using both.
So, and I think that points to, in that particular case, likely they're using us for Kingsley, because the Kingsley buses currently have stops, just like for Family Focus, which is a point I think we should consider in this. If there is an existing bus route that will continue, and that bus route is planned to continue, and it stops in front of the provider, that is somewhat different than you are, creating a separate bus route, right? The reason it's on here is because it's less than 1.5 miles, but that's a bus route that is just less than 1.5 miles. Correct. it's planned to continue that bus route. So did you have, Colette, anything you wanted to say overall? And then we can
Because I'm
answer
very
questions.
concerned, and I know that this is just a model and just numbers, but I'm very concerned about King Arts and those children walking, even though it's less than 1.5. It's the neighborhood that they have to walk through. And in the past quarter, we've had 2 incidents in that neighborhood, and we're asking children to walk through that neighborhood. And that's a long distance.
It's a very good point. And it does raise the question, too, with respect to the magnets, since ostensibly, either folks do pay for the service if they are able to. Is it possible that some of these families are paying for transportation services, and how does that affect how we should treat them? There's some families that aren't, but they're not paying because they're on, waived, those services are waived.
Yes.
Should we treat them differently then?
Yes, and that's a very good point. And what we did not do is we did not have time to analyze these riders versus the riders that might be affected by the hazard changes versus children who may live in the walk area but who are attending an after-school program. Certainly, if a child is otherwise eligible based on their home address, an option to consider would be to continue to provide busing to a child care location within the District 65 boundaries. That's an option. We bus a large area for both King Arts and Rhodes are considered bus because the kids come from all over, and we have a lot of streets like Gulf Road, Dempster, and McCormick. So a lot of children at those magnet schools are bused, and they're eligible for busing. And those who can do pay for it, we have that whole criteria. So that certainly could be another criteria, again, if a child is otherwise eligible for the bus, and they would be eligible based on the home address, then we could offer to extend transportation to an after-school childcare location, regardless of distance.
One question I had is, this busing we're talking about is from the school that they attend to an after-school program?
Yes.
And then their parents or, designated somebody picks them up from the after-school program?
Right.
And these programs are primarily in part to provide childcare?
Yes.
So we're talking about little kids, right?
No.
No?
We have 3rd through 8th grade.
Through 8th grade.
Their parents choose to have them in an after-school program.
Okay, but a lot of the
But
elementary.
others are cases, like foster reading is case room
And it's
too.
important to acknowledge that I think the district's after-school childcare ends at 5th grade.
I think it goes until 6 p.m.
No, not the time.
The age.
Oh, the age.
Oh, the grade level.
It's at 5th grade level, yes.
Right?
Sorry.
So these
In
are
school
important.
ends at,
In-school, district-provided childcare options end in 5th grade. And the why family-focused Fleetwood, this is an option for parents who really need their middle schoolers to have.
But there aren't any middle school, except for the magnets, there aren't any middle schools
Right,
listed.
not on this. So I think there are middle.
But are we
school kids-
providing
we have
middle,
kids
are we
from
providing
Haven, but they
transportation
walk.
to middle school
They
kids?
walk.
They
We only bus Chute. Chute are the only
Middle
students we
school
bus.
kids walk to
They
the
walk.
after-school.
Okay.
Right, yeah. So they're not affected, but,
but I guess what I was going to say is that it just doesn't seem reasonable for, if a parent needs childcare, for the child to have to walk even a mile to childcare.
Without supervision.
It just doesn't seem reasonable.
well, I think the other side of this is, we also do need, we need to be looking at, in this case, is we are subsidizing childcare. So there's a fine line, there's a fine line between what is the role of the district, or how can we work with our partners to share in that responsibility, that sharing be sharing of cost, that sharing being sharing of a resource that walks younger children to the location. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that's part of the, the viable piece here is, in terms of our mandate and our responsibility is that.
But it's not just a transportation question, I guess. It's not just what are we paying for the buses? It's also, what are we providing here? What is, parents need this childcare, and to get the kids there, that involves buses, but, you know, it really is, I mean, it's a bigger discussion of just a bus service.
No, it is. I think it affects the families, and I think that's why we didn't, wanted to pull it out of even making a recommendation near term. It also brings the fee-for-service concept up again, you know.
Correct.
How might fee-for-service apply in this context? There are some families that are using many of these programs that clearly fee-for-service is not an option for them.
Right. And you have to realize that these kids would be otherwise taking the bus home, and that the child care center is a proxy for home.
Right.
It's not that it's, so.
Exactly. No, I do.
Right, be
I do
clear.
realize that. That's why.
Proxy for not being at home. and
Those
they would
kids who are
otherwise-
eligible,
Pardon?
those kids who are eligible would be taking a bus home.
Correct.
So I think that comes back to the question of, you know, if it's, do you look at only kids who are eligible for busing to their home, but
So right now, to be
somewhat
clear,
arbitrary.
anybody who goes to an off-site after-school program is offered bus service to that childcare, to that program? But, and this is everybody, like, but everybody's offered it. Not everyone necessarily takes the option, but.
Oh.
How do you get on the list?
I guess,
How do you get
so
on
this is not just current regular bus riders. So
That's-
there's
that's
somebody who
correct.
can walk to school in the morning, but they're eligible.
Yes. And Jordan, if you want to add
Somebody
how this information is
goes-
shared.
So this list includes anybody who is routed to these stops, but that is both eligible riders for regular busing
Right.
and non-eligible riders. So if we are going to the Y and we have eligible riders already going there, it has been practiced up to this point that we also allow non-eligible riders to just ride the bus. in the
Because we
afternoon, and
have a
this
bus
number
going there
reflects
anyway.
both of those.
So even if we took out the non-eligible riders, we'd still have eligible riders. So if we're providing the bus anyway, why wouldn't we just continue to provide the bus to the non-normally eligible bus riders?
Then the question becomes, do we bus them to those spots based on a mile and a half, or on a mile and a half, or is it on the bus route? Like a normal, would it be a part of the bus route?
I guess I'm not or maybe I'm not asking the question correctly. So right now, so for example, to Dewey, where there are 21 students who are going to the YMCA after school. Are those 21 students, are they riding the bus in the morning as well, like from their homes? Or
Some of them
Some of them are.
and some of them could not. I don't have the answer.
But we're
yes.
saying that we are proposing eliminating for all 21 of those, taking them to the YMCA.
We're simply showing the data, and
Showing
we're
the data
saying
of what the board
options
policy
to
would
consider. Board policy would say, we can't bus them a half a mile because that's not a mile and a half. Board policy would say we should not bus them. However, they may be eligible based on their home address. So they may be coming in on a bus in the morning due to a hazard or a mile and a half. But the board policy does say we could consider a mile and a half distance. So there's all sorts of options. If a child is otherwise eligible, maybe we say, you know what, hey, let's just put them on the bus. We'd be busing them somewhere anyway.
Right.
And why not just let them take the bus
But
to an
if that's-
in-district location?
But if that's the case, and we're going to say, okay, these Dewey students who are otherwise bus riders, if we have to take them home, we'll just go ahead and take them to the Y. I guess my question is, why wouldn't we just take everybody to the Y then?
And space availability may be an issue, especially if we're reducing, you know, we are trying to pare down buses, and we've been doing that through the years. When we have a bus that's running, you know, low on ridership, we have consolidated buses.
Because it's not like it's a bus just going straight to the Y. The Y is a stop.
It's a stop, right, right. And
The service question becomes.
yes, and let me give you this example. Here's one to think about. So Lincoln, the child care list, if we made the hazard changes at Lincoln, Lincoln would be a walk area school, except for the 6 kids that we have to get to school somehow. So let's say there's no bus at Lincoln because the 6 kids were able to route on a special ed bus. So there's no bus at Lincoln. So we would not have a bus to take 13 kids 1.2 miles to the Y. There would be no bus. There would be no bus to follow board policy and take the one child 2.3 miles to Fleetwood or Family Focus. Now that child, according to board policy, would be eligible. We'd have to figure out how to get them there. And 3 kids going to Salvation Army would not have a bus because they're not eligible and there is no bus at Lincoln. So Lincoln is a good example. If we make the hazard change, we lose a lot of flexibility with after-school
I was
programming.
going to ask about that. So the hazard, I'm just thinking about going to the Y,
Mhm.
and I haven't looked. How would they wouldn't encounter any hazards
The hazard is,
walking to the Y?
they might. That was not evaluated, and it's not part of board policy. Board policy simply refers to the mile-and-a-half distance.
How
So I
old
guess
is that board policy? It frankly doesn't seem like very good board policy surrounding an after-school
I'm sure some
program.
legal updates were made. I've included a copy. We can see when the last updates were made, but the last update doesn't mean the entire policy was rewritten. There was an update to Transportation Policy 4:110 in January 2015.
It could have been looked at too recently because we aren't following board policy, so you think that issue would have raised its
Surfaced.
head had we looked at it.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Mary, you might know the answer to this. I know that at Dewey a couple of years ago, there was a Y bus that came to pick up.
And, you know, we asked the Y. We contacted the after-school programs here, and the Y did used to provide a bus. Let me see if I can find my
Last year they had a bus.
I think it was 2 years ago. Or I think this might be the second year they aren't busing. Let me just
I think
find
she
my
said
notes.
it's the second year.
Second year that we've been doing it?
Yeah.
They had one last year.
They still do have some vans. What they told us was that due to their budgets for this fiscal year, they significantly pared down their fleet of vehicles. So they still have some, and they're filling in at some schools, our schools where they need to right now, but that, you know, this change would require them to then get a whole bunch of vehicles back.
And the YMCA and the BITE after-school program were both interested in either cost sharing or seeing if they could get District 65 pricing with positive connection if they could work out an arrangement. We spoke with Fleetwood and Family Focus, Miss Avery, I believe, and Salvation Army. And I was just going to say, we did contact Miss Avery, and she said it would be devastating if the district did not provide this. It would be very devastating to the children and to the program, both at Fleetwood and Family Focus, and also at Salvation Army.
So I think John had a comment or question. Not that, you know, he'll defer to you, I'm sure.
Of course. I guess my question would be, Claudia, and to the group, if this doesn't look like good policy, then what would your recommendation be? And should the location be shorter? Should we come with a proposal that says we'll bus all parents who request a different, or 0.5? What might your recommendation be? Would it be only from schools that, for example, don't offer their own childcare program, as many of our schools do? That we'd want to prioritize children at schools that don't have an after-school program that's available. If this doesn't look good, what would you suggest?
I suggest you
Full guidance to
come with some proposals. I mean, I think it's going the wrong way here. You're asking the board to come up with a suggestion for, you know, I think you should say, okay, we know how, first of all, is this all-inclusive? Is this everyone? Are we sure this is everyone? I would make sure the data is correct. Get your data correct. Once we get the data correct, then I would start to say, what are viable options? This is where I was going in the beginning, saying that we should look at the whole transportation program, because we could be saving a lot more than $120,000 if we can, you know, figure out ways to do this efficiently. So
I guess my question comes from, there are infinite number of viable options. We could do anything.
So come up with 3 and bring it back to the board is what I would say.
So I think it'd be helpful for me, it'd be helpful for us to get some directionality from the board of which way, bring us a proposal that saves $1 million.
So, no.
Make sure that no change. I mean, that would be helpful.
Can I just interrupt? I think here's from a source of direction, there's a couple things. One is I think we need some additional information with respect to who these students are. You know, both free and reduced lunch, the same information that you provide others. If we have race, free and reduced lunch, and home location, so we know how many of them would qualify for busing based on their home. Because there are a lot of viable options that have been talking here, but we don't know how viable they are until we have data to assess that against. So, so that would be step one. I think the second thing is we should exploring fee-for-service and how viable or not viable that is, depending on the partner and depending on, the student, is one thing that we would like, I'm hearing, we would like and could potentially get into a policy for this specifically. Secondly, we should look at a policy that if there are, in my mind, and people can object, but I think a policy that if there is an existing route going to a daycare provider and there is availability on that bus, why not include children on it? And
Whether or not they take a bus in the morning.
whether or not they take a bus in the morning or not. So that would reduce potentially some efficiencies, but I think that just makes practical sense. So if others object to that, as offering that as one option, then please say so, but I'm trying to kind of collect what I'm hearing here. And I don't know if there's.
I want to add one more, just variable, which is the safety variable. And so that if an option looks really great in terms of us operating, and yet we have some concerns about the safety of the children walking through said community, we should consider that.
Yes, and so I think safety is not just IDOT hazard safety, right? We have to take a little broader, we have to take a broader definition of safety.
I think it's a good idea if you got these providers together.
Yeah.
Yep.
And talk to all of them at the same time and the appropriate people to talk to.
Yeah,
at those sites.
So if we could have that kind of
Very
form.
good.
And if this takes a different timeline than the previous discussion, I think that's okay.
I do too.
Yeah.
If others, okay.
Yeah.
But, hold on.
Well, the only thing to consider is if we're going to get confirmation, that's when we also get alternate drop-off information. So it would affect that if we wanted to gather that information in an appropriate time for routing, we would need that.
And when you're getting confirmation is when you're, at what point in the process?
It's on the application. Yes, I want busing. Here is my alternate.
Yeah, but when does that happen?
Well, we're hoping to do that before school's out because over the summer was not effective last year.
But a decision in early February isn't required for that, or would be required?
Well, I would be thinking we would put, by March, having confirmation forms go out to families.
Okay,
So that's
so then,
3.5
that just, increases the amount of work in a shorter timeframe.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly, other creative solutions, John. I think that what we should focus on is the values here. The values that I'm hearing from a policy and our values is that while from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint, we know it is not our responsibility to subsidize childcare. However, children have to get to a destination after school, and if that's not home, then we need to look at what our options are to make sure that they are safe after school. So if one of those is, yes, we have a school provider, I don't know, that opens up other cans of worms over us encouraging our use of our service, actually real ways of encouraging use of our service over others. I don't know if that gets us into any other, I wouldn't say legal binds, but, ethically, whether that's appropriate, that we can use busing as a way to do that. So I have a little bit of a concern about that.
But the value of, I appreciate what you're saying, I think that's helpful. The value of what I'm hearing is students who are receiving free and reduced lunch as one piece that we'd want to look at in terms of the demographics, who the children are. Looking at cost efficiency, so if there's already a route, maximizing those routes, considering safety and ensuring that we're considering safety in all the decisions we're making and prioritizing safety in terms of, and then looking at the fee-for-service option.
Cost change, yeah.
So hopefully that helps provide some level of direction. Okay. Thank you for joining us, Colette. If we're done with this conversation, unless you have anything else that you think we need to cover, I do want to take a quick break before we go.
I just want to.
Okay, so.
I want to go back to Omar's point about the larger comprehensive study of transportation, and just, I am more thinking out loud now of how to think about that, how to set the parameters and how to do that. That's going to be something that will take us some time and perhaps some consultative help. And so we have to, and again, there's a cost involved in that, but I think that may be something that I'm going to want to consider with Mary and Jordan and others to think about how we look at the big picture. What we presented tonight were slices, smaller slices, and we can surely move forward on those. The larger issue is something that we're going to have to think about, and then think about where we would find the resource to help us out on that.
And I think this board is open to us to looking to external expertise if that's what we need to make the large, to make a more comprehensive and macro choice.
I was just going to say, we did go through the entire IDOT hazard list, and we evaluated all of them, and that we came up with these areas that no longer met IDOT criteria. There were hazards, Dewey has several, in fact, we added some because they should have been on record. Very complicated area to bus around and from. Willard still has hazards on record. We have the hazard at Orrington. We have a hazard at Kingsley, crossing McCormick. So there are existing hazards that we looked at all of the hazards, and the hazards that are remaining are ones that still meet the IDOT criteria. So we looked at those, and we did highlight the mile-and-a-half areas of attendance where we are required. We could look at options for magnet school busing. We could look at all sorts of things. And hazardous busing actually is considered optional. In 1982, the state allowed districts to provide hazardous busing. It's not required. We are required to bus at 1.5 miles, and that's not an IDOT criteria. That's a Illinois school code criteria.
Did you say? No. No? Okay. All right. We're going to take just a 3-minute biological break for anyone who so chooses, and then we'll go on to our next discussion. Reconvene. I wonder if all those other conversations. Is that me?
Could be a cell phone.
Still in there. Okay.
Thank you.
The cell phone close to the microphone will do that.
Oh, okay.
Tons of cell phones close.
Oh, boy. Okay, we're just going to go. So the next discussion item is, wow. Yeah. Turn them up.
Okay.
I'm echoing. Feeling very powerful right now. The next discussion item is the student fee, action item. Yes. Right, we still have an action item for student fees. We're going to move into a somewhat related discussion item, but we'll start with the action, which is on student fees for fiscal year 17. Can you brief us, Mary?
Yes, we are recommending the fees remain the same for 16-17, with the exception of we are proposing a $10 increase to the technology fee and a $6 increase for the students meeting reduced lunch criteria for technology. So currently it's at, let me see here, lost my place, $20 and $3, I believe, $6. And we are recommending increasing that to $30 for non-free and reduced students and $9 for children meeting reduced criteria. And the increase in the technology fee we're estimating will bring in about $40,000 additional dollars that will go toward technology expenses for classroom use.
So are there questions? I will raise a question when we get to it, no others, because Richard had sent in a couple questions since he couldn't be here, but I'll make sure that gets represented. Meg.
Dr. Brown, do you know the difference or why the history behind the difference between the $30 and $40 classroom activity fees between elementary and middle school?
But I'm sorry, the classroom activity? Mm-hmm. I do not. I think they always had a higher amount at the old upper grade levels. Perhaps materials are more expensive. I don't know. I believe that was in place when I came. Like that difference where it's a higher amount at a higher grade.
I have a question. About the technology fee?
Okay.
Which is, how is $10 decided upon, I guess? Because, I mean, yes, technology costs are going up, but so are almost everything else. I mean, other items are going up too, that would probably be covered by the general student or the classroom activity fees, so why are we not touching those when we are touching technology? And then the further question is, and how was $10 decided as the amount that needed to happen?
We are looking at the cost of technology, which is way more than we're bringing in fees to cover. We're looking at potentially moving some technology expenses back into the operating budget. These are items that are used in classrooms and to support the classroom. So based on that, and we felt the technology fee was low at $20. We felt $10 was reasonable, and so that was the only fee we are recommending increasing.
But you didn't think that there was a need to increase the other two, either of the other two?
Not at this time.
So piggybacking on that, am I getting the number right that we were projecting moving over for next year $50,000 from the debt service to operating? So I guess my question would be, it would make sense to me that we would foot the amount of an increase as a rationale or justification of how much of an increase for technology that we potentially foot it to. What would it equate to for $50,000? Here we're looking at reaping $40,000, which isn't that much money, but at minimum, it seems kind of to make sense that if we're moving $50,000 over, we got to pay for that in some way. If we pay for that via fees, then what would that mean in terms of incremental technology spend? So I guess it means a little bit more than what we're asking. It would be more than 10, but it wouldn't be that much. That's just a thought, because I think it does make sense. It's something you can easily communicate and explain to folks. To the point of technology expenses, when we brought 3 years ago when we introduced the first technology spend, I believe the team had brought a number of ranges of what other districts were charging for technology fees. We took kind of the very low end of that as an introduction to this arena. And I do think, to your point, Claudia, we mentioned at the time, we thought it was underestimating, or we know it's underestimating, obviously, our technology costs, and that we might look to increase that. But how much is a very good question here. If we're going to move monies from debt service over, it seems to me it would make sense to do it commensurate with that amount.
But it's also something that we're charging parents directly for, as opposed to when it was in debt service, we weren't.
Correct. Right. And many districts do that, right? They're a much heavier fee-for-service focus for a number of reasons. And I think we've had some of that conversation before as to, what's the ideal balance of those things that could be fee-for-service versus spread across the tax base.
Mm-hmm.
We're also in a process of doing discovery that would lead to a re-upping of a technology master plan, which would lead to us knowing in better ways where we want to go with technology and how much we want to spend. And so again, we didn't want to, we thought that the raising of the fees here would start to catch up to comparable districts, or either locally or around the state, but without far exceeding that and without putting a burden on parents right yet, or those who have the ability to pay. But also, as we finish the discovery and then move into a master plan, we're going to have to come back and say, here's what we really need to be fully functional on our technology.
One thing that I had heard or learned at the IASB conference that I thought was a good way of us potentially as a governing body looking at that over the long term is that many boards set a spend per student on technology. So as opposed to us looking at, deciding whether we get 5 iPads or 55 Chromebooks or whatever, we could benchmark technology spend per student, and we could come to some agreement, and it could be part of this planning process, on what is the right balance of spend per student on average. We know that varies at different grades, but that might be a better way for us as a body to inform that process around technology spend, so we're not getting into the execution or the implementation, but then could also then potentially dovetail to, okay, well, what part of that fee then do you, or what part of that cost then is borne by the school district at large, or is borne by the fee for service? It helps to get us there. So that would just be one thing that we could entertain as we continue to go into this process, because it becomes a little more concrete as opposed to the way we have been looking at it in the past. So that's all good for future. For today, what?
I don't know, it just feels arbitrary to me. I'm sorry, Dr. Brown, you haven't sold me on this is a good, that a $10 charge and raising fees in this area is, when there are other things we need to look at, that this is the right thing to do right now. Might be the right thing to do after a little bit more study, but it just seems kind of out of the blue, and to me,
And I don't have a problem with the fee increase. I would rather see it be foot to match to the $50,000 movement of funds, because I think that makes sense. I think it also will potentially can help us signal to the community that, that is only step one, right? That's not the 400,000, and not to say that we're going to push all that into fees, but that it is part of the strategy. So
and it can't be, because 35% of our students are not going to pay that full cost.
Correct, right.
Too,
We're still going to bear a part of that, obviously, correct. But it's just for those that are able. So would that rationale be more viable for you, Claudia, as taking a near-term action, or you just don't think we should do anything right now? If we said, and I don't know what the number is, but if we said $50,000 divided by however many, you came up with a number, it would be probably $12 or something.
If we pretended that everybody was going to pay 30, and we took at that time the number of students, we would be having $221,000, I think, if my math is right.
I was seeing it as incremental to the 20. So the 50, so the increase would be commensurate with the $50,000.
Yeah.
Assuming that everybody.
If we were going for a spend per student, right, our spend per student would be $30 on technology.
Yeah, but on a spend per student basis, it's going to be much higher. If we do a target spend per student, it's going to be much higher. I don't even have any idea. I think that's part of what we would need the administration to come to us and say, these are the ranges of spends per student. So but for now, it would at least connect the increase to something that we are doing in the budget, which is making a movement out of debt service to operating. We have to cover that, even though it's small, we still have to cover it. And saying that we would cover it through this increase.
Through a fee.
Increase in the fee. That's what I would feel comfortable with.
So then you're proposing that we increase it more, because right now it's only 40,000, that would be.
Correct. It would be whatever it would take to get to 50,000.
And we could compute that. It might be something closer to $12.50 of an increase. I'm just basing it percentage-wise, but I have to go back into that number.
So that's my proposal. We have 3 people here. So if we want, you're the third.
I know.
Claudia.
There's me.
Claudia.
That's late.
Okay, so we'll see if that flies, and if it doesn't, then we'll do something different. So we'll vote for this proposal.
Which proposal?
What I just stated.
What you just stated?
$50,000 version?
Generate $50,000 to match the $50,000 that.
Now I'm going to put it out.
What we're voting for is to take that to the board.
Correct.
Correct.
What would it put the price at?
We aren't sure.
They'll have to come back.
I'll have
So
to
the language
compute
would
it.
have to be that the increase would be tied to a
But do we
movement.
have any idea, because?
I think it would be like 12.
$12-ish.
12 to
12-ish.
13, maybe.
Would it be?
Of an increase,
Of an
that is.
Would it be
So that would be
accurate to-
$32.50 or so
So
forth.
instead of 10 to 20?
Instead of a $10 increase, it could be a $12.50 increase. I have to back into the
Could
$50,000.
we divide 50,000 by the number of students we have?
No, because we have free and reduced
We have
kids
free and
and so many
reduced.
But we pay,
reduced. and-
but the schools still get that, right?
This technology,
I mean, isn't it like the school district subsidizes the free and reduced lunch students?
yes, but the technology fee is not dispersed to the schools. That is used here for technology payments, expenses. So, but if we can yield 50,000 in fees total, it would offset the 50,000 that we can move into the operating budget. And could get that number by Monday, certainly, but I just don't have it at the moment.
So that's an option. If you don't want to vote on that, then. Okay. Well, I got to see how to say it. Well, let's see. I'll try to craft what it would say. The Board Finance Committee recommends that the student fees, do I have to amend? The student fees for fiscal year 17 be presented to the full board on December 14. As recommended, except the increase in technology fee would be commensurate with.
To yield.
To yield $50,000 in incremental revenue.
Thanks.
Okay. Now we can.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
You can vote no if you don't want.
No.
Yes.
So it'll move it to the board.
Yeah.
Then you can think about have more discussion there. So that's part one of our action. The second piece would be the update on student activity fee process. Paula, do you want to come down here, or do you want to stay there? So here we're just looking to, we visited this a few months ago. I don't remember the last time we talked. August. It was August, I do remember. And so a process has been put in place, and just updating on where we are in that process and how it's working, and any respective concerns we have or comments from.
I did have a point of clarification.
Sure.
So I want to make sure that we're all talking about the very same thing. So returning to Mary's chart here, we have general student fees, classroom activity fees, and technology fees. The fees under question are what is called in this chart classroom activity, correct? Mm-hmm. Not classroom activity plus general student.
That's correct.
So that's because in the document that you sent us, what you put together is something that's called student activity accounts. And that's both of them, right?
No.
It isn't?
By student activity fees, I'm referring to the classroom activity fee. So those are the activity fees. That's what I've referred to it as, a student activity fee. I understand the word is different.
Yeah.
So,
but in this, where did you put the general student fees then? Where did that go?
the general student fees are what we collect. We provide those to the schools in the block grants. So from the school perspective, those are referred to as the block grants.
Okay.
The technology fee is what we collect from parents. Those, as Dr. Brown just stated, are budgeted here.
Mm-hmm.
They're not budgeted at the school level.
Okay.
So, John, what is the total amount for just this category then? What are we talking about, dollar-wise, across all the schools?
For
student
classroom or student activities, I'd have to look that up.
Oh, sorry.
And I don't know if I have access to it this
No,
evening.
that's okay. I just was trying to see order
Would
of
it be
magnitude.
accurate to multiply it by 30
It's in the
and 40?
board book at the end where it shows collection.
Oh, right.
It's like 39. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, go ahead. I'll have to look if I need.
Way in the back.
Thanks. Go ahead. Do you want to start, John?
So, yeah, I mean,
Give us
the
a-
update that I provide is I think that the process this year has gone extremely well. I think we had a late start getting our guidelines posted and getting a procedure worked out. I checked in with principals just recently. I've received a school-based budget from all of the schools that incorporates the student activity fees or classroom activity fee, the block grant, and the SIT funds. Principals have each worked with a group of teachers within their schools to plan how those different funds are going to be allocated for the coming school year. Principals are getting feedback as I take a look at those plans and provide them with feedback. Principals have also had a chance for the first time to take a look at each other's spending plans, find good ideas, ways that other schools are using funds in creative or unique ways that they had not considered before, take those ideas back to their school and their staff. We also had an opportunity to hear from the other Dr. Brown, Dr. Jeff Brown, principal of King Arts. He shared some of the ways that, some of the process that he used in going through this process with his staff. And so I think the process has gone very well. I think this is something that needs to continue over time. And I think communication can and will improve over time as principals share and learn from one another, as teachers learn from principals and from one another about what this process is and how they can best be involved. I think what we're seeing right now is that the approach, what I believe, is that the approach that we're using is meeting the need that we're seeing in the schools and meeting the state standards that are set for principals around specifically building staff capacity around understanding and contributing to the budget.
Thank you.
Sure.
Let's have questions. Any, in addition to, do you want to start? Or
We don't
comments?
have questions. I think we just, I think Meg was going to just talk about, we actually conducted a survey, and so we've been asking teachers, you know, how informed they are about these monies, because, you know, we've been bringing this up for, is it about?
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years now. And I just wanted Meg to sort of report on.
Okay.
Because I think we still have a ways to go.
So we, in 3 days, we surveyed our teachers and we got 334 responses in 3 days, which we think is pretty fabulous. So we got some positive feedback and we got over 100 comments along with our questions. And so I'm gonna, so we have, I think my administrators have been pretty transparent about how funds are used. And another one, I've been at my school 8 years, and this is the first year I have been included in any budget-type discussions. I'm hopeful this will continue, so we know how much of our student money we have left to spend. Cautiously optimistic, so I think that's good. But we found that there's still a great deal of growth that needs to be done about the transparency and communication around student activity fees. So we know that out of the 34 teachers, that 90% of those teachers said they were interested in how the student activity fees were budgeted, but that over 60% of them are still not informed of the student activity fees. And a few comments. I've never even heard of this. Thank you for your time, your help, and support. Our principal just put together a budget committee, and I'm on this. We will meet for the first time this week. So this was just done last week. This is so incredibly unclear and hard to utilize the money. I'm a special ed teacher. I wasn't aware that I had access to any activity fee money for the students I see. So I still think that, you know, we have some ways to go, and I think we're going to continue to work on the process together.
Is it possible to get that data
You,
for the team?
I emailed it to you.
Oh, you did?
Yep. So you should have copies.
I was going to say, I don't miss my emails, man, so.
Did you do the comments too?
I didn't do the comments because there's comments about buildings and administration, so we kept that out.
Okay.
But I think that overall,
I think that's something that, John and Paul should have as much.
And I think that overall, the buildings we've heard from where there has been, here's how we're going to do it. This is our committee. They've done, Dr. Brown did the presentation over at King Arts, and we've gotten really positive feedback. So we'd like more of that. We'd like more teachers to feel like there's a light bulb going on and they finally have an understanding of what's happening. So we appreciate you guys putting this on the agenda. We think this is really important to our teachers. They tell us that this is something they want to know about, that they really appreciate having information about these monies, how they're being made available in the buildings, so that they can, use them for their classrooms, for their students, and it really helps them with their instruction.
Just three things. One, I've also heard, actually through Dr. Brown, the other Dr. Brown, through Jeff, and got some very good feedback. So that's actually great in terms of a model, and there's other models around the district. Second, I appreciate how the three of you are working together and tackling some of this, and how we actually move forward on this. And third, John, if I have it right, our principals are also going to be evaluated on transparency and budget. And so part of the Illinois state standards on doing good work as a principal is to move forward on this. So there's also a important continuous improvement leverage point to be able to engage in transparency around school budgets.
And so just kind of comparing the information there, one of the questions I had for you, John, was on the informal survey. It said that 13 of the principals invited the entire school staff to the budget planning meeting. Does that mean, because like 7 of those are using the instructional teams, and then 8 are doing something else? So they may use the instructional teams, but also have a broader meeting. Is that what this is? That's explaining?
The question was about, when you met with your team about the budget, did you put out an email to your entire staff inviting them to come?
I see. Okay. So the team, okay. So then it would be, what other things are you seeing other than the instructional teams for the other 8, if we had 15 schools? What other structures is this taking shape in? Some are doing their own budget committee, but what else? How else?
Yeah, some are doing a budget committee, some are doing it with department chairs, some are doing it with, so I think that the 7 principals said that they're using an existing team. So 6 of those are ILT, I believe the other one was department chairs.
Okay.
That are being utilized. The other principals indicated they had created a new team or a new committee or a new structure in order to do this work in their schools. So of the principals who said existing teams were used, ILT, and then department chairs.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I had a question too about sort of the same thing. Of the 9 principals that indicated that teachers had little to no interest in the budgeting process, did they go ahead and create some sort of team to address them, even though the teachers weren't interested?
So what I don't know is the overlap between those questions. So all principals worked with a team of teachers to create their budget plan and provide it, and have provided a copy to me.
All of them, but some of them found in the working it out that the teachers they were working with had little or no interest.
That there was little, they said, let's discuss it, great, let's move on. There wasn't a lot of input, or there wasn't a lot of yearning for additional information or detail. There weren't a lot of teachers that said, yes, please, can I come to that meeting? So I just think, that's what I think that refers to. And anecdotally, as I've talked with my colleagues, what are you experiencing? What's happening? Principals are saying, yeah, we discussed it. There really weren't that many questions about it. We moved on to the next topic. So I think those are the kind of comments that I'm
So
getting.
do the results of this survey that DEC did surprise you?
No, they don't surprise me, and I think I believe both. I think when you ask teachers, do you want to know more about the budget? Yeah, I'd like to know more about the budget. When principals ask teachers, are you able to stay today for 45 minutes to discuss the budget? Well, I've got students to help out, and I've got papers to grade, and I've got a district committee that I'm serving on. So no, they don't surprise me. I think it calls upon everybody to continue communication, continue to collaborate. I think that falls upon the principals. I think that falls upon the teachers. That if teachers have questions, they should be reaching out to their principals. I think as principals have opportunities, they should be reaching out to their teachers. And here's the process, here's the opportunities to be involved, and here's the final product. So I believe both. I think they're both
I think you're
interesting
right
and
that you
compelling.
could, because those are two very different questions.
Yeah.
Can you stay after school for 45 minutes, and can you, are you interested in knowing more about the budget? Those are two, they're very different questions.
But that's, at some point, the rubber hits, I mean, you're going to have to give of your time at some place, right, to do that. So I think that's
When I was a teacher, SIT was a track, you could get track movement for doing SIT, right?
We don't have SIT anymore.
We don't have SIT anymore.
We have
Okay.
ILT.
That's a whole nother.
Okay, ILT, can you get track movement for it?
Sure.
Could you get track movement for serving on a budget committee?
I don't think I'm not sure if we've seen that. I think the track applications are reviewed at the school level, and then we get recommendations in HR.
But that would
It would be a leadership activity.
It would be a
so
leadership
that
activity.
I would
Okay.
think the teacher could.
I guess I was trying to get at, would there be any reward other than job well done if you served on a budget
It would be
committee?
a leadership activity. You can use it in your portfolio.
Okay.
So one of our questions is, has your building principal attempted to include you in discussions about the budgeting of the student activity fee monies? And, I mean, it's about right now 60% are saying no. So this is what we mean when we say there's a ways to go.
So again, I think if this team can get that data, maybe separately, you guys could sit down and walk through it and talk about, where it's consistent with what we're hearing, then that is really helpful to continuing
So the
dialogue.
goal is really to get teachers more collaboratively involved in this. That's the ultimate goal of everybody. Am I right on that?
Well, I mean, I think our goal is, we want transparency. In other words, we want teachers in the building to be able to look at something that shows them how these particular monies are being allocated throughout the building.
So that's it's a different role. That's a different function than pure involvement. And that's something that, I mean, that seems like that's an easy thing to
Absolutely.
get us to, right? Like, the deliverables should be available, whatever it comes up with, whatever the process was. So that's something that we should be able to provide as soon as when each school is finished. And is that a format, John, that can somehow get back to, I don't know how it gets communicated out, but that you guys could work together on figuring out how that could best be communicated?
We talked about that.
Yeah.
But if the teachers weren't happy, would it make a difference?
The teachers weren't what?
They didn't like the way the money was being used.
Well, I would.
What would happen then?
I mean, part of it would be, I mean, obviously, we would hope that there's first an initial presentation, like with any budget, you discuss before you, approve something. So we would hope that that is happening in the buildings as well.
Right.
There's a discussion. I think the current model, Dr. Brown over at King Arts, they did a presentation at a staff meeting, so everybody got to see it and make a comment about it.
Teachers had input,
Yes.
because
It sounds like they had a really nice, diverse group of representation on their committee, teachers from different areas, from different grade levels, from different content area, special ed, and, that they had a really nice diverse group of people on the committee from what I heard. So it sounds like that they had a really nice group of people on the committee that was very representative of everybody in the building.
Well, I guess I get back to what's the shared goal? Is it for teachers to just know, or is it for them to have input? Because those are two very different things in a process.
Both. I would say it's both. I would say.
If you have
yes.
input, you will know.
Well,
But
yes.
those who
hopefully eventually,
don't
yeah.
avail themselves of input can still know.
Sure.
I mean, so I think they are both parts of the process. There's certainly, having input is one of the bedrocks of the standards for evaluation, because they're trying to build capacity and involvement, correct,
Right.
of teachers in
I
the
would say the
process.
standards call for something higher than having input. It's really understanding the the decisions and how they balance, which is why, one reason why I've insisted on the three sources of funding that schools deal with: block, student activity, classroom activity, and SIT being considered together. You understand how these different funds play off of one another and reinforce one another and support the school's vision and mission. So I think building teachers' capacity involves, so transparency, do we know how money is spent? Did I have a chance to have some input? Has my principal taken some affirmative steps to provide me an opportunity to learn how those decisions are made and what the trade-offs are? And I think that's where the standards are at as far as distinguished practice.
And
So that's the goal.
would you agree that's a common set of goals from your perspective for teachers?
Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Well, we're aligned around our goals, and we will keep
That's
working
good.
on the process.
And we'll talk about the more specific data in one of our weekly meetings.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you for
very
bringing
much.
that data forward. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Sean.
My pleasure.
Okay, we are moving, is this the last item?
Get a
No,
couple.
probably not. We have two more.
So let me start. This is on.
This is
part
a
of your
very
package.
exciting budget update.
This is really exciting.
What we've
Budget
all been
process
waiting for
update.
tonight.
I'll do this rather quickly, but again, as we've talked about budget processes, given all the uncertainties over the next few years, we've had a set of conversations around this table and around the board. And as we move forward to engage an advisory committee to the superintendent, to me, I wanted to share some more of the materials that we're going to work with the committee and see if you have any other input and suggestions for us. So again, in context, we've talked about the structural deficit that we're facing. We've talked about, and we've provided some benchmarking information across different districts. And as we move forward on the superintendent's budget advisory, I wanted to take advantage of something that previous boards had convened and the previous superintendent had convened, the Citizens Ad Hoc Budget Committee that reported back in December of 2011, and just take advantage of their work. And so as we prep to work with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee of 2016, we wanted to look at the report that they proposed rather than recreating the wheel, and to give you a bit of an update of where we're at, and then to see what other thoughts that you might have. So in the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, there were recommendations around reforming salary, around the rising cost of benefits, around staff to student ratios, around revenue enhancements, and around expense reallocations. And in the package that we provided, we both gave you the report, but we also gave you a spreadsheet of the different recommendations, and talked about some of the potential annual savings where we can talk about that, and then provided some background information on where we're at and where we could go. What I wanted to do as we move forward is, again, as we convene this group of advisory members, I wanted to make sure that you had reviewed the material and really to seek your advice and any other input, either on the information we have here or any other input that you'd like to suggest. And so I leave that up for discussion for as long as you can have a discussion.
As long as we have it in us at this juncture. Okay. So is there an interest in walking, I'm going to assume folks have read the summary,
As did I, so that otherwise
so
I
we
would
don't have to
through it.
walk through that.
Yeah.
If there are specific questions for clarification, you can ask.
I was curious why it says draft.
What?
Well, across every page.
Costs every page of what?
The old report.
The old report.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know whether,
Maybe it's just
Because that implied to me that there was some final version which may not be the same as this.
I don't think there was.
oh, that's interesting.
It's always
Apologies.
draft. It's never final. Apparently, it wasn't finished because we're doing it now.
I will double check that for you. I appreciate that. I believe this is the final, but it says draft, so.
Disconcerting to me
Yeah,
to
yeah.
read all this stuff and think, but what if this wasn't the final thing? No, I mean, that's what a draft implies.
I don't know why it has the word draft on it.
It's a good point.
We will check and respond appropriately, but
Okay.
fully believe this is the final.
And the spreadsheet summary, I think, was really very helpful. So I wanted to thank Kathy, I know she's not here, and Maria and Mary and anybody else that was involved, because I think it's useful to see it a little bit in that format. And, you know, some places we don't know what the potential savings are. We would have to do further analysis, but at least shows what has been done.
And I like that it didn't say draft.
And it did not say draft. That's the only one I looked at. It's not final either, I guess. Before we open up to questions, one of the things I had sent via email was I think it would be, as in terms of focusing this discussion, especially at this hour, if there are particular things, you know, if we're commencing the work in January, or Dr. Gorin is with the team, if there are particular things that we believe based on this is one starting point, that based on today, you know, the context of today, our new strategic plan, our values that we think of this set, we should not have that team consider. I think we should raise that here if there are things that we believe that should be taken off the table, or at least some of us have concerns. And if there are specific things that we think weren't covered or weren't part of the scope or purview that should be added to consideration. It doesn't mean that the task force will necessarily come back with recommendations related to that, but that we as a board specifically would like to ask them to. Those are the two things that I would be helpful, I think, to the team here. Yes?
I think I'd take the cell towers off again.
Okay. No one have to worry about using cell towers? Okay. Which item is that?
I can't remember.
Additional revenue, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't spend time on cell towers. It's going to be windmills now. Others?
Well, I mean, I think what we were discussing earlier in terms of with busing, but I think it can have larger implications on looking at attendance maps, boundary lines.
Redistricting.
Yes.
And it is somewhat referred to, because in the staff, in the scenarios question, where is this?
It's in there somewhere, I don't remember now where. But.
Just made a reference to in item 11, under section C, use class guidelines to staff the district. Mentions that increasing the size of classes will require changes to enrollment areas, boundaries. And that wasn't an explicit item in terms of increased class size. It was really increased to the top end of our current guidelines, which is somewhat different than a separate item, which could be consider increasing class sizes. So we could add that to that, calling out specifically consideration of attendance, changes to attendance area mapping. Understanding that in and of itself is a huge undertaking.
Of course it is, but I mean, I think that.
Not all of which would be done in January.
Of course not.
In terms of the analysis.
Would there be some?
Is there enough that could warrant more
Thank you.
analysis?
Yes. Finish my thoughts. I can't finish them myself.
Okay, sorry. My husband hates when I do that, but you like it. Yes, Meg.
Do you need the things in here that have to do with negotiations, since that all has to be negotiated anyways?
I think
In the spreadsheet,
In the
The
spreadsheet,
wrong document.
so in the spreadsheet, though, we're very sensitive to
Yeah.
things that have to be negotiated, and I'm hoping that we're sensitive enough so that you can, as you review it, you can get back to us and we'll.
I mean, I think we did include, there were specific recommendations that came forward before around, there weren't amounts, right? There weren't targets, but there were specific recommendations under section A of 1, 2, and 3. And then we note these all would have to be negotiated. So the task force is obviously not going to be negotiating.
Correct.
But they could potentially look at, are these things that they too would recommend we consider, or, you know, that are considered in the process of negotiation. I think that's as far as it goes, potentially. Does that answer your question, Meg?
Right, yes. And it's probably going to be part of the negotiations discussion anyways. So it seems like, couldn't the task force, if you know that salary schedule is naturally going to come up in negotiations, it seems like you know it's already going to be there, wouldn't you want to discuss something else? How much time do you want to spend on salary when you already know it's going to come up in negotiations? I guess I'm just thinking about focusing your conversations.
And I think that's something that the task force
That's all
will
I'm
need to
saying.
consider.
Yeah.
I think that about really the whole document, that I don't think we need to point out descending order of importance.
No.
Or things that seem like very last case, like looking at volunteerism in the classroom as a reduction. I mean, we trust the committee to go through this and approach it in
a meaningful way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the conversations we've had with some of the members have been, we know you will likely not come back with 20, but the goal would be to hone in on those that are most meaningful. There may be some data collection to see which are most meaningful, right? Because what has the potentially the most highest value, or et cetera. So I wasn't asking us to prioritize that list for them, but just merely to say what should be added or what should be off, that we just don't want them to spend time with, or we think is sorely missing from the conversation.
And we don't want to reinvent the wheel, so that if many of these suggestions may come up naturally, and many of these suggestions may stimulate more suggestions.
Did I see it?
No, that's fine. One other thing relating back to our transportation discussion from earlier, and I think I've mentioned this at a meeting before. If there's any way to explore what it would look like to do busing in-house, if that's even at all feasible, is it totally off the rails? Or would it, I mean, other school districts do it. Could we do it at any sort of savings? Or, I don't know.
Well,
Maybe,
can I answer that?
no, is the answer already no? Okay.
Well, no, it isn't. It's certainly something that, we've thought about, and where would we park 80 buses? Probably over there in the north field, that would have to be, concrete. But the biggest expense that we would have to fund is buying school buses.
Right.
And the average school bus is around $100,000, and that is not like a special ed bus that needs a lift and air conditioning and radio and all that.
Right.
Video recording. So it's a costly endeavor, and either we need to buy them or lease them, but that is the largest cost.
Well, certainly, yeah, as an upfront cost, but would there be yearly? I mean, because we just saw a big increase in our transportation contract this year. So are there any long-term savings, even though I understand it would be certainly a big
And there's
upfront cost?
And a
then
funding
like
question of how you
staff
would
it.
fund that upfront cost.
Question.
Right.
Who drives, and we'd have some of the same issues that our provider has. But we can.
Although if
we
we
can
can combine it with
sketch
other
out some
part-time
numbers.
stuff we have. And
Well, I think the ask is just take it to the task force to decide
Right.
whether
Is
they
it
believe
worth
that-
considering?
is it worth
Right.
considering.
And maybe the answer is no, that's fine, but I don't think we've ever really explored it, as far as I know.
I have does anybody else have others? Claudia, do you have others that should be considered or should be taken off from this list?
Well, I was just asking about this, because I was surprised to hear there was this, the current incentives for good attendance, you given our sub-problem, et cetera, and so I just asked, what was the incentive? How long has it been in place? And I found out that's when the sick days got doubled, which is an illogical incentive.
Yeah, well, that's a separate topic
I mean-
to cover from a negotiation. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a separate topic.
But
But the incentives are not necessarily aligned with the objective.
exactly, yeah. Or they don't reach the people that they need to incentivize.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So we can put that as a point on that one. I think you have a lot of people that agree there. I don't know if this is a nuance. So I've got 3 things, and none of them are fun or happy, but I think we have to consider the plausibility of it. One is previously in the kind of the boundaries of this any programmatic changes were off table. So my question is really, I know there's been work from the administration, not necessarily solely to programmatic changes, but work that you've done in the fall, thinking through what are options for reduction. So the first question is, how will that work be brought into this, or will it not? Will it operate on a separate track? How will it form this process? Because that's a separate process beyond what happened in 2011 and may have come up with, I don't know, other things.
I think the way I'd like to proceed is in sort of general buckets, so that if it's personnel reductions or personnel changes or programmatic changes or those sorts of activities, that rather than go, we've done some work as an administrative team of what would happen if scenarios, and I think what we'd want to do to keep, one, to respect the negotiations process, and two, to stay at a level where we can get advice and counsel from folks who are participating, is to have some generic buckets that we can move forward. And I think, so I'll be prepared to do that, but to go down to, a list of 35 prioritized items, I don't think that's the role for the panel. That's where we'll get feedback from the panel that then we can come back and look at some of the choices that we might have to make win. So more long-winded answer is more general buckets around where there might be reductions.
And would that include programmatic, or still stay out of any programmatic? Because then when I think of going to the benchmarking stuff, the discussions that we've had in the past and level of spend in different areas, and knowing that that wasn't 100, that wasn't perfect, but it was some direction, are we expecting to use that at all for this team? Because it does point to, level of spend points to in program areas, right? So
again, right now, I would like to say in general terms rather than in very specific terms, and then we'd have to figure that out. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but.
Well, I think we just need to come back to by the time of January is whether program changes, program options are off the table or not off the table as part of consideration. So I would leave that as a question back to you all.
Yeah, and I think we probably just have to think through on the table, off the table, or at what level on the table.
At what level on the
Is
table.
it,
Correct.
the committee would say, based on the comparables, maybe look here, but not be recommending specific ways to realize savings in that bucket.
Understood.
So I think it's sort of a question also of grain size. So I think we have to be thoughtful between now and then about the appropriate way to handle that in the committee to respect negotiations and, but make use of the data that we've gathered. I think finding that balance is going to be important.
Okay.
And it respects the negotiations and administrative decisions and ultimately administrative and board decisions. That's the way I'd like to proceed.
And then the other two things that I do see that were not part of the consideration was actual increase to class size. That is an option that I think we have to look at what the real, what's the real value there? Could it be done? Could it be done without some other enrollment changes or whatever? It connects to that. And from my standpoint, I think we should also put on the table potential site consolidation or reduction as an option to be explored. They can determine whether it's viable or not. But we've learned that, obviously the volume of our sites does drive a significant amount of costs, and
those options may actually tie to each other. If there was at all a consideration of site consolidation, there potentially would be an increase in class size.
Correct. Yeah. So again, these are not things that I think should, I'm not want to say anybody say that I think they should happen, but I think we should be considering them because we have the order of magnitude of savings that we've got to look for. So.
It is in here to a certain extent.
Right, site consolidation?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Really?
To enrollment area boundaries and/or magnet school selection, it's under, I guess, C. 11?
Yeah, enrollment boundaries. Nothing comes out specifically and says potential for either consolidation or reduction of sites.
That's how I took it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I guess I was
All right,
wrong,
then.
but I mean, that was to me the implication of what you were talking about.
Okay. Omar, you've been very vocal tonight. You should continue this. Come on. Anything else?
Something on the mic, so. No, Omar has nothing to say.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for
Well, thank you. I mean,
this work. I think it'll really set the team up well in January, and we're looking forward to those discussions.
Thank you.
Okay, the last thing. Mary, Mary's going to quickly make us just ecstatic about the future of our financial situation. She's not.
This ties in so well with the conversation we just had, which is we certainly know that the district is looking ahead at nothing but deficit budgets. We are gravely concerned about what the state might do with school finance. Might they change funding formulas? Might they just not make a payment to us? Might there be a property tax freeze, which from what I'm hearing in Springfield is very likely. All of this does not bode well for the district moving forward. We are concerned also about the low consumer price index for this calendar year. We've all seen gas drop below $2 a gallon. I would be excited if that happened in January, but not at the end of a year when I want the CPI factor to be as high as it can be, because that factor determines the increase on our largest revenue source, property taxes. So the consumer price index as of the end of October was 1.3. We have seen gas fall since then, so and we have 2% used in the projections as an assumption. So you can read the memo. I am providing the timelines. If the board were to go for an operating referendum in the fall of 16, the board would have to vote by mid-August of 2016. That is the last date that will help, if we had a successful operating referenda, that is the last election date that will help impact the 17-18 school year, and that is the year I am the most concerned about. We have a small deficit projected for 16-17. We think we can balance that without large changes to any program or service, but 17-18 is the year I am very concerned about. And so the election dates are provided here. There is a spring 2017 election. However, if that were to be successful as an operating referendum, it would not impact us until 18-19. So we have one chance left to help ourselves in 17-18, and it is a fall election. So happy to take any questions, and if anyone has any.
Any questions? No.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have one FYI. Do you want to ask a question about the FYI transportation update?
I just wanted to know, and she left, but so it looks like the routes are increasing every month.
I had the same question. There's a huge number of routes.
As compared to last year?
And yes, I did ask Jordan about that, and she is new to the position this year, so she is counting an AM route as one route and a PM route as another route, because each route has the chance to be late. So she may be double counting the routes, which is the correct way to count, where last year, and we aren't sure what methodology was used when we received the information last year, it may have been a route, you know, is like Kingsley Route 3 is a route, but there's a morning route and an afternoon route. So how Jordan Ryan is reporting the number of routes this year is based on a morning route being one route and the afternoon route being a totally separate route. And she announced earlier today that the district last year for 14-15 had 165 bus routes. This year for 15-16, we have 153 bus routes. So we have 12 less bus routes this year.
Data just doesn't reflect it. So, I mean, when you look at it, it's confusing.
Yeah.
But that's what it is.
Okay. If there's no other questions, then it's 10:50. I will call this meeting adjourned.